Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're settling in for the night and need something to help you drift off to sleep, you've come to the right place. Tonight I'm reading some absolutely wild stories from the Am I the Bad Person subreddit, and honestly, these are the kinds of situations that make you grateful for your own problems because at least you don't have to deal with people this entitled. Well, maybe you do, I don't know. Before we start, comment below where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing where the algorithm puts these videos. It's super fascinating to me. Anyway, grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore some truly questionable decision-making that'll either validate your own life choices or make you question everything you thought you knew about human behavior. Our first story comes from someone dealing with what might be the most devastating parenting fail I've ever encountered. Am I the bad person for skipping my son's graduation to attend my daughter's wedding? This happened several years ago, but it's still causing problems in my family, and I need to know if I made the right choice. My daughter Emily was getting married on the same exact day as my son Daniel's high school graduation. Both events had been planned for months, and there was absolutely no way to change either date. Emily had been planning her wedding for over a year. She'd booked the venue, sent out invitations, and put deposits down on everything. The wedding was going to be this beautiful outdoor ceremony with about 150 guests, and she'd been dreaming about it since she was little. She's my oldest child and my only daughter, and watching her get married felt like such a milestone moment for our family. Daniel's graduation was scheduled for the same Saturday afternoon. He'd worked incredibly hard throughout high school, maintained good grades, and was planning to go to college in the fall. I was proud of him, but I kept thinking about how graduation is really just the first of many educational milestones he'd have. He'd have college graduation, maybe graduate school, professional achievements. There would be plenty of opportunities to celebrate his academic success in the future. When I realized the conflict, I talked to both of my kids about the situation. Emily was devastated at the thought of me missing her wedding. She said it was a once-in-a-lifetime event and that she needed both her parents there to walk her down the aisle and share in the most important day of her life. She started crying and said she couldn't imagine getting married without me there. Daniel seemed more understanding initially. He said he knew weddings were a big deal and that he wouldn't want to mess up Emily's special day. He's always been more laid back than his sister, and I thought he was being mature about the whole situation. Looking back, I wonder if he was just trying not to cause more family drama. My husband and I discussed it extensively, and we decided that Emily's wedding had to take priority. A wedding only happens once, hopefully, and we felt like our presence was more crucial there than at a high school graduation ceremony. We thought Daniel would understand, especially since we'd be celebrating his achievement in other ways. We arranged for Daniel's grandparents to attend his graduation and take photos for us. We promised him a special dinner and a generous graduation gift to make up for our absence. I thought this was a reasonable compromise that honoured both events as much as possible, given the circumstances. The wedding was absolutely beautiful. Emily looked radiant, and it was everything she'd dreamed it would be. I was so glad I was there to see her walk down the aisle and start this new chapter of her life. The whole day felt magical, and I couldn't imagine having missed it. But Daniel's graduation apparently didn't go as smoothly as we'd hoped. According to his grandparents, he kept looking for us in the audience during the ceremony. When his name was called and he walked across the stage, they said he looked disappointed that we weren't there to see it. The photos they took just weren't the same as being there ourselves. After graduation, Daniel seemed different. He was polite but distant, and he didn't want to talk much about the ceremony. When we tried to celebrate with him later, we took him out for a nice dinner and gave him the laptop he'd wanted for college. But something had shifted in our relationship. Throughout college, Daniel became increasingly independent. He rarely called home, didn't ask for help with anything, and seemed to pull away from the family more and more. I attributed this to normal young adult development and didn't think much of it at the time. The real wake-up call came 4 years later when Daniel graduated from university. We assumed we'd be invited to the ceremony and started making plans to attend. We were excited to finally be there for one of his major academic achievements and to make up for missing his high school graduation. But when Daniel called to tell us about his graduation plans said he'd only invited a few close college friends to attend the ceremony. He told us very matter-of-factly that he didn't think we needed to come and that it would just be a small celebration with the people who had supported him throughout his college. We were years blindsided. I completely asked him if this was because we'd missed his high school graduation, and he said it wasn't about punishment or revenge. He just felt like we'd made our priorities clear years ago, and he'd learned to celebrate his achievements with the people who actually showed up for them. My husband and I were devastated. We tried to explain that missing his high school graduation had been an impossible choice between two important family events, and that we'd always supported him and been proud of his accomplishments. We offered to throw him a separate celebration or take a family trip to honor his college graduation. Daniel was polite but firm in his response. He said he appreciated the offers, but that he'd already made his plans and was comfortable with his decision. He said he didn't hold grudges, but that he'd simply moved on and found his own support system. The whole situation has created lasting tension in our family. Emily feels guilty that her wedding caused this rift, even though we assured her it wasn't her fault. My husband and I are heartbroken that we missed such an important moment in Daniel's life and that our relationship with him never fully recovered. Daniel maintains a cordial but distant relationship with us now. He calls on holidays, sends thank you notes for gifts, and is perfectly pleasant when we see him. But there's an emotional distance that wasn't there before, and I don't know how to bridge that gap. Looking back, I wonder if we made the wrong choice. Maybe we should have found a way to attend both events, even if it meant leaving Emily's wedding early or arriving at Daniel's graduation late. Maybe we should have recognized that Daniel's seemingly mature response was actually hurt that he was trying to hide. Some of our family members think we did the right thing by prioritizing the wedding, since it was truly a once-in-a-lifetime event. Others believe we should have found a way to support both children equally, regardless of how logistically challenging it would have been. The situation has made me question my instincts as a parent and wonder whether I failed Daniel at a crucial moment in his life. High school graduation might happen to lots of people, but it was Daniel's graduation, and maybe that made it just as special and irreplaceable as Emily's wedding. I keep thinking about how different things might be now if we'd made a different choice that day. Would Daniel still call home regularly? Would he have wanted us at his college graduation? Would our family still feel whole and connected the way it used to? Am I the bad person for choosing Emily's wedding over Daniel's graduation, even though it seems to have permanently damaged my relationship with my son? That story just ended, and honestly, this breaks my heart on so many levels. You can't treat your children's milestones like they're competing against each other and then act surprised when the one you deprioritized learns to celebrate without you. Daniel didn't suddenly become distant for no reason. He learned that when push comes to shove, his achievements come second to his sister's big moments. The fact that OP seems genuinely confused about why Daniel created boundaries shows they still don't fully grasp the impact of their choice. Sometimes the damage we do to our relationships can't be fixed with dinner and a laptop. Let's move on to our next story, which involves some questionable decision-making around personal property and family expectations. Am I the bad person for not letting my sister borrow my car for a road trip? My sister Julia called me last week, asking if she could borrow my car for a road trip she's planning with her friends. She wants to drive from our city to the coast for a long weekend, which is about a 6-hour drive each way. She said her car is making weird noises and she doesn't trust it for such a long trip. Here's the thing though, Julia has a really bad track record with vehicles. In the past 5 years, she's totaled 2 cars and had multiple accidents that were her fault. The first car she totaled when she was texting while driving and ran into a tree. The second time, she was speeding in the rain and hydroplaned into a guardrail. Both times, she walked away without serious injuries, but the cars were completely destroyed. Beyond the accidents, Julia is just generally careless with other people's belongings. When we were kids, she borrowed my bike and left it outside overnight where it got stolen. She's borrowed clothes from me and returned them stained or damaged. She borrowed my laptop once and somehow managed to spill coffee on the keyboard, which cost me $300 to repair. My car isn't anything fancy, but it's reliable and I need it for work every day. I saved up for months to buy it, and I've been really careful to maintain it properly. The thought of Julia taking it on a long road trip with her friends, who I know like to party and drink, makes me incredibly nervous. When Julia first asked, I tried to be diplomatic. I told her I was concerned about lending out my car for such a long trip, especially since I need it for work. I suggested she could rent a car instead, or maybe find another friend who could drive. Julia immediately got defensive and said I was being ridiculous. She pointed out that the accidents she'd had were years ago and that she's a much more careful driver now. She said she couldn't afford to rent a car and that none of her friends had reliable vehicles either. She accused me of not trusting her and holding past mistakes against her forever. I tried to explain that it wasn't about trust, but about practical concerns. If something happened to my car while she was using it, I'd be stuck without transportation to get to work. Even if her insurance covered the damage, I'd still have to deal with the hassle of repairs and potentially miss work while the car was in the shop. Julia said I was making excuses and that family should help each other out. She reminded me of times when our parents had helped me when I was younger and said I should be willing to do the same for her. She got increasingly upset and accused me of being selfish and only caring about material possessions. The conversation escalated when Julia said that my refusal was going to ruin her entire trip. She'd already made plans with her friends, booked accommodations, and was really looking forward to this getaway. She said I was being unreasonable and that a good sister would find a way to help. I stood my ground and told Julia that I wasn't comfortable lending my car for a long road trip. I offered to help her look into car rental options or see if there were other transportation alternatives, but she wasn't interested in those solutions. Julia ended up cancelling her trip and has been giving me the cold shoulder ever since. She's told other family members that I ruined her vacation by being unwilling to help when she needed me. Some of our relatives have reached out to suggest that I should have been more accommodating, especially since Julia really needed the help. Our parents are staying neutral on the surface, but I can tell they think I should have lent her the car. They've made comments about how family should support each other and how possessions aren't as important as relationships. Julia has been posting passive-aggressive things on social media about fake family members and people who can't be counted on when it matters. She's clearly trying to make me feel guilty about my decision, and it's working to some extent. I keep second-guessing myself because I do love my sister, and I hate that she's upset with me. Maybe I should have taken the risk and lent her the car. Maybe I'm being overly cautious because of her past mistakes. But I also feel like I have the right to protect my property and make decisions about who uses it. The whole situation has made family gatherings awkward, and I'm tired of feeling like the bad guy for setting reasonable boundaries. Julia hasn't apologised for the accidents she's had or acknowledged why I might be hesitant to lend her my car. She seems to think enough time has passed that her track record shouldn't matter anymore. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my sister borrow my car for her road trip, even though it meant she had to cancel her plans? This story ends there, and honestly, Julia's track record speaks for itself. 2 totaled cars plus a history of damaging borrowed items equals someone who doesn't get to borrow your only means of transportation. The fact that she immediately jumped to emotional manipulation instead of acknowledging why you might be hesitant shows she hasn't learned from her past mistakes. You're not responsible for funding her vacation through the potential destruction of your property. Sometimes protecting your boundaries means disappointing people who've proven they can't handle the responsibility. Let's dive into our next story, which shows how family members can turn basic financial responsibility into emotional manipulation. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my mum's new phone? Last month, my mum dropped her phone and completely shattered the screen. It was one of those newest smartphones that cost around $800 when she bought it 2 years ago. The phone still worked, but the screen was cracked badly enough that it was difficult to use and probably unsafe, since little pieces of glass kept falling off. When my mum told me about the accident, I felt bad for her because I know how frustrating it is to deal with a broken phone. I suggested she look into getting the screen repaired, which would probably cost around $200, or maybe consider getting a less expensive replacement phone if the repair wasn't worth it. But instead of exploring those options, my mum immediately said she expected me to buy her a brand new phone to replace the broken one. She said that since I have a good job and she's on a fixed income, it only made sense for me to take care of this expense. She'd already been looking at phones online and had picked out one that cost over $1,000. I was taken aback by her assumption that I would just automatically pay for a replacement. Don't get me wrong, I love my mum and I want to help her when I can, but I'm not exactly rolling in money myself. I have my own bills, student, loans, and I'm trying to save up for a house down payment. A $1,000 unexpected expense would definitely impact my budget. I tried to explain my financial situation to my mum and suggested some alternatives. I offered to help her research repair options or look for a more affordable replacement phone. I even said I could contribute a couple $100 toward whatever solution she chose, but I couldn't cover the full cost of an expensive new phone. My mum got upset and said I was being selfish. She reminded me of all the things she'd done for me over the years, how she'd supported me through college and helped me get established in my career. She said that now that I was doing well, I should be willing to help her out when she needed it. I felt guilty hearing her talk about everything she'd sacrificed for me, because it's true that my parents worked hard to give me opportunities. But I also felt like she was being unrealistic about my financial situation and expecting me to solve her problem in the most expensive way possible. The situation got more complicated when my cousin Liam got involved. My mum had apparently called him to complain about my refusal to buy her a new phone. Liam called me up and told me I was being ungrateful and that I should appreciate everything my mum had done for me over the years. Liam said that when your parents need help, you don't think about the cost, you just do whatever it takes to take care of them. He said he would gladly buy his mum a new phone if she needed one, and he couldn't understand why I was being so cheap about it. I tried to explain to Liam that it wasn't about being cheap, but about being realistic about my finances and not wanting to set a precedent where I automatically pay for every expensive thing my mum wants. I pointed out that there were less expensive solutions to her phone problem that would work just as well. Liam said I was making excuses and that family should come first before my savings goals or other financial priorities. He said my mum had raised me and deserved to have her needs taken care of now that I was an adult with a job. The pressure from both my mum and Liam made me doubt myself. Maybe I was being too focused on money and not focused enough on helping family. But at the same time, I felt like they were being unreasonable in expecting me to pay full price for the most expensive option when there were other solutions available. I finally told my mum that I would help her get her phone repaired or contribute toward a more reasonably priced replacement, but I wasn't going to buy her a $1,000 phone. She said that wasn't good enough, and that if I really cared about her, I'd make sure she had a phone that worked properly. My mum ended up borrowing money from my aunt to buy the expensive phone she wanted. She's been giving me the cold shoulder ever since, and she makes comments about how some children appreciate their parents, while others are too selfish to help when it matters. The whole situation has created tension in our family, and I keep wondering if I should have just bought the phone to keep the peace, but I also feel like giving in would have sent the message that I'm responsible for replacing anything expensive that breaks in her life. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my mum's entire new phone replacement when there were other, more affordable solutions available? That story ends there, and honestly, expecting your adult child to automatically replace your broken luxury items is pretty entitled behaviour. A cracked screen doesn't require a $1,000 solution, and turning family guilt into financial pressure is manipulative. The fact that she borrowed money from someone else to get exactly what she wanted proves this was about getting the most expensive option, not about actually needing a working phone. Setting boundaries around unreasonable financial expectations isn't selfish, it's necessary. Our next story takes us into the world of family members who think your time belongs to them by default. Am I the bad person for saying no to babysitting my brother's kids again? My brother Adam has twin 4-year-olds, and over the past year, he's gotten into the habit of asking me to babysit them pretty regularly. At first, I didn't mind helping out occasionally, because I know being a parent is hard work, and everyone needs a break sometimes. But what started as occasional favours has turned into him treating me like his personal, on-call babysitter. It began with Adam asking if I could watch the twins for a few hours on weekends, so he and his wife could go grocery shopping or run errands together. That seemed reasonable, and the kids are generally well behaved, so I agreed to help out. But then the requests started becoming more frequent and for longer periods of time. Soon, Adam was asking me to babysit so they could go out to dinner, then for entire evenings so they could see movies or go to parties. The requests evolved from a few hours on Saturday afternoon to full-day commitments that would eat up most of my weekend. And Adam never really asked anymore, he just assumed I'd be available. Last month, Adam started texting me on Wednesday or Thursday each week, telling me what time to come over on Saturday to watch the kids. Not asking if I was free, just informing me when I was expected to show up. When I mentioned that I might have other plans, he'd get annoyed and say that family should be a priority. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago when Adam called me on Friday night and told me I needed to watch the twins all day Saturday because he and his wife were going to a wedding out of town. He said they'd already RSVP'd and booked a hotel room, and that I was their only childcare option. I told Adam that I had plans for Saturday and wouldn't be able to babysit. I was supposed to help my friend move into her new apartment, something I'd committed to weeks earlier. I also mentioned that it would have been nice if he'd asked me before making plans that required my availability. Adam got furious and said I was being selfish and unreliable. He said that helping family should come before helping friends, and that his kids were more important than whatever social plans I had. He accused me of not caring about my nephews, and said that good aunts make sacrifices for their family. I tried to explain that I do care about the kids, but that I can't drop everything whenever he decides he needs a babysitter. I pointed out that he never offers to pay me for watching them, never brings them to my place so I don't have to disrupt my own routine, and never asks if the timing works for me. Adam said that payment shouldn't matter because we're family, and that taking care of his kids should be something I want to do out of love, not obligation. He said I was being petty by bringing up money, and that he was disappointed in my attitude toward helping with the twins. The conversation escalated when Adam said that since I don't have kids of my own, I don't understand how hard it is to find reliable childcare. He said I had more free time than he did and should be willing to use some of that time to help him out. He made it sound like my life was less important because I don't have children. I told Adam that I couldn't watch the twins on Saturday and that he needed to find other arrangements. He said I was ruining their plans and that they might have to miss the wedding because of my selfishness. He hung up on me before I could respond. Adam ended up getting his mother-in-law to watch the kids, so they were able to go to the wedding after all. But he's been giving me the cold shoulder ever since. He's made several passive-aggressive comments about how you can't count on some people when you really need them. The situation came to a head last weekend when Adam texted me, again, assuming I'd be available to babysit. This time, I told him directly that I wasn't going to be his default babysitting option anymore, and that he needed to make other arrangements for childcare when he and his wife wanted to go out. Adam blew up at me and said I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. He accused me of being bitter about not having kids and taking it out on his children. He said that if I really loved my nephews, I'd want to spend time with them instead of looking for excuses to avoid them. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to spend time with the kids, but about him assuming my time was always available and never respecting my schedule or other commitments. I said I'd be happy to babysit occasionally when asked in advance, but I wasn't going to be his regular, unpaid childcare solution. Adam said I was being dramatic and that families supposed to help each other without keeping score. He said I was acting like spending time with his kids was some huge burden instead of a privilege. The conversation ended with him saying he'd remember who was there for him when he really needed support. Since then, Adam has been telling other family members that I refuse to help with his kids and that I'm not the aunt he thought I was. Some relatives have reached out to suggest that I should be more flexible since Adam is clearly struggling with the demands of parenting twins. Am I the bad person for telling my brother that I won't be his automatic babysitting solution anymore and that he needs to respect my time and schedule? That story wraps up there, and Adam clearly doesn't understand the difference between occasionally helping family and being treated like free labor. The fact that he went from asking for help to just informing you when to show up demonstrates exactly how entitled he became. You're not his employee, and being child-free doesn't mean your time has no value. Family help should be appreciated, not expected, and definitely not assumed without even asking. Time for another story about someone who learned that setting boundaries with toxic family members always comes with drama. Am I the bad person for not inviting my aunt to my birthday party? I'm turning 25 next month and decided to throw myself a birthday party at my apartment. Nothing too fancy, just close friends and family members I actually enjoy spending time with. When I was making my guest list, I deliberately left off my Aunt Karen, and now it's causing family drama that I probably should have expected. Karen is my mum's older sister, and she has this way of making every gathering about herself, while simultaneously putting other people down. She's been doing this my entire life, and I'm honestly tired of pretending. It doesn't bother me just to keep the peace at family events. At family gatherings, Karen always finds something to criticize about everyone. She'll comment on people's weight, their career choices, their relationships, or really anything she can think of. She frames these comments as being helpful or just being honest, but they're actually just mean observations that make people feel bad about themselves. Last Christmas, Karen spent the entire dinner making comments about how I should be married by now and asking, going to give when I was my parents' grandchildren. When I said I was focused on my career right now, she said that career women always end up alone and that I'd regret prioritizing work over finding a husband. She also made several comments about my cousin's weight, suggesting she should consider joining a gym instead of bringing dessert to family dinner. When my uncle mentioned that he was thinking about changing jobs, Karen immediately started listing all the reasons why it was a bad idea and how he'd probably fail at anything new. The pattern is always the same. Karen makes these cutting remarks throughout any family gathering, and when people get uncomfortable or push back, she acts like everyone else is being too sensitive. She'll say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "someone has to tell you the truth," as if being cruel is actually a virtue. At my college graduation party 2 years ago, Karen made comments about how my degree was impractical and how I'd probably struggle to find a good job. When I did land a great position 6 months later, instead of congratulating me, she said I was lucky and that the job market must be easier than she thought. I've tried talking to my parents about Karen's behaviour, but they always make excuses for her. They say that's just how she is and that I should ignore her comments because she doesn't really mean anything by them. They act like tolerating her rudeness is just part of being family, and that calling her out would cause unnecessary drama. But here's the thing, it's my birthday party and I want to actually enjoy it. I want to celebrate with people who support me and make me feel good about myself, not spend the evening managing Karen's need to tear everyone down while acting like she's doing us all a favour. When my cousin Chloe found out that Karen wasn't invited, she called me up to ask if there had been some mistake with the invitation. I explained that I'd deliberately chosen not to invite Karen because I wanted my party to be a positive experience. Chloe said I was being dramatic and that Karen's comments aren't that bad. She said that family's family and that you don't exclude relatives from important events just because they're a little blunt sometimes. She accused me of holding grudges and being too sensitive about Karen's personality. I tried to explain that it wasn't about being sensitive, but about wanting to enjoy my own birthday without someone constantly making negative comments about me and my friends. I said that Karen's behaviour goes beyond being blunt and crosses into being consistently mean and discouraging. Chloe said I was overreacting and that Karen would be hurt if she found out she was the only family member not invited. She said it would create permanent damage in our family relationships and that I'd regret excluding her over something so petty. The conversation got more heated when Chloe said that mature adults learn to deal with difficult family members instead of just cutting them out. She said that avoiding Karen was childish and that I should be able to handle a few uncomfortable comments for the sake of family harmony. I told Chloe that I wasn't trying to cut Karen out of my life permanently, but that I had the right to choose who I wanted at my own birthday celebration. I said that wanting to enjoy my party without being criticised wasn't unreasonable or immature. Chloe ended the call by saying she was disappointed in my decision and that she hoped I'd reconsider before it was too late. She said Karen had always been proud of me and would be devastated to learn that I thought so little of her that I wouldn't even invite her to my birthday. Since then, I've been getting texts from various family members asking about the party and hinting that Karen should be included. My mum called to ask if I was sure about my decision and said that Karen had been looking forward to celebrating with me. I'm starting to feel guilty about the whole situation, but I'm also frustrated that my family expects me to tolerate behaviour that makes me uncomfortable just to avoid hurting Karen's feelings. Nobody seems concerned about how her comments affect other people, just about making sure she doesn't feel excluded. The party's in 3 weeks, and I'm torn between sticking to my decision and giving in to family pressure. Part of me wonders if one evening of dealing with Karen's comments would be worth avoiding all this family drama. Am I the bad person for not inviting my aunt to my birthday party because I don't want to deal with her negative attitude and constant criticism? That story ends there, and honestly, you have every right to curate your guest list for your own birthday party. The fact that your family keeps making excuses for Karen's behaviour instead of addressing it shows they've been enabling her for years. Wanting to enjoy your special day without someone who consistently makes cruel comments isn't dramatic or immature. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing people who've gotten comfortable with you absorbing their negativity. Looking at our next story, we have someone dealing with family financial pressure in a slightly different way. Am I the bad person for not paying for my cousin's prom ticket? My cousin Olivia is a senior in high school and prom is coming up in a few weeks. Last weekend at a family barbecue, she approached me and asked if I could pay for her prom ticket because she said I make more money than her family does and it would be easier for me to cover it. I was honestly surprised by the request because we've never been particularly close. Olivia and I see each other at family gatherings, maybe don't really outside of those events 3 or 4 times a year, and we text or hang. She's always been polite, but we don't have the kind of relationship where I'd expect her to ask me for financial help. The prom ticket costs $250, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it's not pocket change either. I'm 28, and I do have a decent job as a software developer, but I also have my own expenses and financial goals that I'm working toward. When Olivia asked me about the ticket, I was caught off guard and didn't know how to respond immediately. I told her I'd need to think about it, which seemed to disappoint her. She said that prom was really important to her and that she'd been looking forward to it all year. Later that evening, Olivia's mum, my Aunt Linda, pulled me aside and said that Olivia had mentioned talking to me about prom expenses. Linda explained that they were going through a tough financial period because her husband had been laid off from his job 2 months ago. She said they were struggling to cover basic expenses and couldn't afford the prom ticket on top of everything else. I felt bad hearing about their situation, but I also felt uncomfortable with the assumption that I should automatically step in to pay for Olivia's prom ticket. Linda said that since I don't have kids of my own and I'd have stable income, it would mean a lot if I could help Olivia have this experience. I tried to be diplomatic and said that I understood they were going through a difficult time, but that I wasn't in a position to pay for the prom ticket. I suggested that maybe Olivia could look into fundraising options or see if the school had any financial assistance programs for students who couldn't afford prom expenses. Linda seemed disappointed by my response and said that she thought family was supposed to help each other during hard times. She mentioned that she'd helped me out when I was younger, though I honestly couldn't remember any significant financial assistance she'd provided. A few days later, I got a call from my Uncle Rick, Olivia's father, who had apparently heard about our conversation. He was much more direct than Linda had been and accused me of being selfish. He said that $250 was nothing to someone with my salary, and that I was being stingy by refusing to help his daughter. Rick said that Olivia had been talking about prom for months and had already found a dress at a thrift store because they couldn't afford a new one. He said that missing prom because of the ticket cost would be devastating for her, and that I had the power to prevent that disappointment. I tried to explain to Rick that it wasn't about the amount of money, but about the principle of not wanting to set a precedent where family members automatically expected me to pay for their expenses. I said that I worked hard for my money and had my own financial priorities and goals. Rick got angry and said I was being ridiculous. He pointed out that I don't have a family of my own to support, so I should be more willing to help relatives who are struggling. He said that successful family members have a responsibility to lift up those who are less fortunate. The conversation got more heated when Rick said that Olivia looked up to me and had been excited about the possibility of me helping her with prom. He said that my refusal was teaching her that family can't be counted on when it matters, and that she'd remember this disappointment for the rest of her life. I told Rick that I was sorry they were going through financial difficulties, but that I couldn't be expected to pay for Olivia's prom ticket. I suggested that they might want to look into payment plans or other options for covering the cost. Rick said I was making excuses and that if I really cared about Olivia, I'd find a way to help her. He said that family should come first and that my attitude was selfish and disappointing. He hung up on me before I could respond. Since then, several other family members have reached out to me about the situation. Some have been supportive of my decision and said that Rick and Linda shouldn't have expected me to pay for Olivia's expenses. Others have suggested that I should reconsider because prom is such an important milestone for teenagers. My mum called to say that she understood my position but thought I should consider helping Olivia since the family was going through such a hard time. She said that sometimes being the financially stable family member means making sacrifices to help others, even when it's not technically your responsibility. Olivia hasn't spoken to me directly since the barbecue, but I've heard through other family members that she's really upset about not being able to afford prom. Apparently, she's been crying about it and feeling left out while her friends make their prom plans. The whole situation has made me feel guilty, but I also feel like I'm being pressured into paying for something that isn't my responsibility. I care about Olivia, and I don't want her to miss prom, but I also don't think it's fair to expect me to automatically cover her expenses just because I have a job. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my cousin's prom ticket when her family's going through financial difficulties? That story ends there, and honestly, having a stable job doesn't make you the family ATM. The fact that they went straight to you instead of exploring other options, like payment plans or school assistance programs, shows they saw you as the easy solution. Rick's comment about you not having your own family to support is particularly gross because it implies your financial goals don't matter. Being related doesn't create automatic financial obligations, especially when you're not that close to begin with. Our next story involves someone discovering that imitation isn't always the sincerest form of flattery. Am I the bad person for telling my sister-in-law to stop copying me? My sister-in-law been copying everything Megan has I do for the past year, and it's gotten to the point where I feel like I can't make any personal choices without her immediately doing the exact same thing. When I first noticed it, I thought it was just coincidence, but now it's so obvious that even other family members have started commenting on it. It started small. I got a new haircut, and 2 weeks later, Megan showed up to family dinner with the exact same style. When I bought a new handbag, she ordered the identical one online and carried it to the next family gathering. I thought maybe we just had similar taste, so I didn't say anything at first. But then it escalated to bigger things. I redecorated my living room and posted some photos on social media. Within a month, Megan had bought the same throw pillows, the same coffee table, and even the same artwork. She arranged everything in almost the identical layout to mine. When I started taking yoga classes, Megan suddenly became interested in yoga too. She joined the same studio I go to and even signed up for the exact same class time. When I mentioned that I was learning to cook Thai food, she immediately bought a Thai cookbook and started posting photos of her attempts at the same recipes I'd been making. The copying extended to my career choices too. When I mentioned that I was considering taking a graphic design course to expand my skills, Megan announced that she was also thinking about getting into graphic design. She researched the same programs I was looking at and even asked me for recommendations about which courses to take. What really bothered me was how she'd present these choices as if she'd come up with them independently. She'd talk about how she'd always been interested in yoga or how she'd always loved Thai food, even though I knew she'd never shown any interest in these things before I started doing them. The situation got more uncomfortable when Megan started copying my clothing style. She'd see what I wore family events to and then show up to the next gathering wearing something almost identical. She bought the same brands I liked, chose similar colours, and even copied the way I accessorised outfits. My brother Ryan, who's married to Megan, seemed oblivious to what was happening. When I tried to mention it to him, he said that Megan just had good taste and that it was nice that we had so much in common. He didn't seem to understand that she was deliberately copying me rather than genuinely sharing my interests. The final straw came last month when I announced that my boyfriend and I were planning to adopt a rescue dog. Within a week, Megan was posting on social media about how she and Ryan were thinking about getting a dog too. She was looking at the same breed I'd mentioned and even contacted the same rescue organisation. I finally decided I had to say something. I called Megan and asked if we could talk privately. I tried to be diplomatic and said that I'd noticed we seemed to be making a lot of similar choices lately and that I was feeling uncomfortable about it. Megan immediately got defensive and said she didn't know what I was talking about. She claimed that any similarities in our choices were just coincidence and that we naturally had interests. She said she'd similar taste and help, couldn't it, if we liked the same things? I tried to give specific examples of the copying, from the haircut to the living room decor to the yoga classes. Megan said I was being paranoid and self-centered to think that her choices had anything to do with me. She accused me of trying to control what she could and couldn't do. The conversation got more heated when I mentioned the dog situation. I said it felt like she was copying even my most personal decisions, and that I needed some space to make choices without feeling like she was going to immediately do the same thing. Megan said I was being ridiculous and possessive. She said that I didn't own the right to have certain hobbies or make certain purchases, and that she was free to live her life however she wanted. She accused me of being jealous that she could afford to buy the same things I could. I tried to explain that it wasn't about ownership or jealousy, but about feeling like my individuality was being erased when everything I did was immediately copied. I said it made me feel like she was trying to become me rather than being herself. Megan said I was being dramatic and narcissistic to think that her life choices were about me. She said that maybe I should examine why I was so threatened by someone else having similar interests and tastes. The conversation ended badly, with Megan hanging up on me. Later that day, Ryan called me upset, saying that Megan had told him I'd accused her of copying me, and that I'd been cruel and hurtful to her. He said I was bullying his wife and that I owed her an apology. Ryan said that Megan had been crying and that she felt attacked and unwelcome in the family. He accused me of being jealous of Megan and trying to exclude her from things that should be shared family experiences. I tried to explain the pattern of copying to Ryan, but he said I was being paranoid and mean-spirited. He said that Megan looked up to me and that I should be flattered rather than threatened by her admiration. Since our conversation, things have been tense at family gatherings. Megan barely speaks to me and makes comments about how some people think they're so special that others aren't allowed to have similar interests. Ryan has been cold toward me and seems to be taking Megan's side completely. Other family members have started to notice the tension, and I've heard through relatives that Megan has been telling people I accused her of copying me and that I was mean to her about it. Some family members think I was wrong to confront her, while others have quietly mentioned that they've noticed the similarities too. Am I the bad person for telling my sister-in-law to stop copying everything I do? Or should I have just ignored it and let her continue mimicking my choices? That story comes to an end, and honestly, that level of copying goes way beyond coincidence into creepy territory. When someone is literally buying the same furniture and joining your exact yoga class, they're not just sharing your interests, they're trying to live your life. The fact that Megan immediately played victim instead of acknowledging the obvious pattern shows she knows exactly what she's been doing. Sometimes calling out weird behaviour is necessary, even if it makes family dinners awkward. Let's move on to another story about family members who think your wallet should always be open for them. Am I the bad person for refusing to lend my dad money again? My dad has a pattern of asking me for money and then never paying it back, and I've finally decided I can't keep enabling this cycle. The last time I lent him money was 6 months ago, and he still hasn't returned it despite promising he would. My dad works in sales, which means his income is unpredictable. Some months he does really well, and other months he barely makes enough to cover his basic expenses. I understand that financial instability is stressful, but over the past few years he's developed this habit of coming to me whenever he's short on cash. The first time he asked for money was about 3 years ago. He said his car had broken down and he needed $800 for repairs. He promised to pay me back within 2 months. I was hesitant because that was a lot of money for me at the time, but he seemed desperate and I wanted to help my dad. 3 months went by without any mention of repayment. When I finally brought it up, my dad said he was still struggling financially and asked if he could pay me back in smaller installments over time. I agreed because I didn't want to pressure him during what seemed like a difficult period, but the installments never materialized. Instead, he came back to me 4 months later asking for another loan, this time for his rent. He said he'd gotten behind on payments and was facing eviction. He promised that once he got caught up, he'd start paying me back for both loans. This pattern continued for the next 2 years. My dad would ask for money for various emergencies, medical bills, car repairs, utility payments, credit card debt. Each time, he'd promise to pay me back, and each time the repayment would never happen. Instead, he'd eventually ask for more money. I kept track of everything I'd lent him, and the total is now over $4,000. That's a significant amount of money for someone my age, and it represents months of careful saving on my part. I've had to delay my own goals and purchases because of the money I've given him. The most recent incident was 6 months ago when my dad called me crying about his rent being overdue. He said he'd been having a really bad month with sales and was 3 weeks behind on rent. His landlord was threatening eviction, and he needed $600 immediately. Against my better judgment, I transferred the money to him that same day. He was so grateful and promised that soon as he'd pay me back as next commission check came in. He said he'd learned his lesson about managing money and that this would be the last time he'd need to ask me for help. 2 weeks later, I saw on social media that my dad had gone out for an expensive dinner with his girlfriend. The restaurant he posted about is known for being pricey, and the meal probably cost more than $100. I was frustrated because he'd just told me he was completely broke and facing eviction. When his commission check did come in a month later, instead of paying me back, my dad bought and took himself a new tablet, a weekend trip with his girlfriend. He posted photos of the trip on social media, talking about how he deserved to treat himself after working so hard. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to cause family drama, but I was hurt and angry that he was spending money on luxuries while ignoring the debt he owed me. Last week, my dad called me again. He said he was behind on his car payment and needed $300 to avoid having his car repossessed. He went through his usual routine of explaining how desperate the situation was and how he had nowhere else to turn. This time, I told him no. I said that I'd lent him money multiple times in the past and he'd never paid any of it back, so I wasn't comfortable lending him more. I explained that I had my own financial goals and couldn't keep giving him money that I never got back. My dad got upset and said I was abandoning him when he needed me most. He said that family should help each other and that I was being selfish by refusing to help with such a small amount. He reminded me of all the things he'd done for me when I was growing up and said that I owed him support now that he was struggling. I told my dad that I'd already helped him multiple times and that he needed to find other solutions for his financial problems. I said that lending money without repayment wasn't helping him. It was enabling him to avoid dealing with his money management issues. My dad said I was being heartless and that $300 wouldn't make a difference to someone with my income. He accused me of holding grudges and said that keeping track of money between family members was petty and small-minded. When I stood firm in my refusal, my dad got more desperate. He said that losing his car would mean losing his job, which would make his financial situation even worse. He said that by refusing to help, I was potentially ruining his ability to get back on his feet. I felt guilty hearing him talk about the potential consequences, but I also knew that I'd heard similar sob stories before, and that lending him more money wouldn't actually solve his underlying problems. After our conversation, my dad called my brother Ethan to complain about my refusal to help. Ethan called me the next day and said I was being too harsh with our dad. He said that family should stick together during difficult times and that I was abandoning our father when he needed support. More doubt that I make Ethan point money than either he or our dad, and said that I should be willing to help family members who are struggling. He said that $300 wasn't a huge amount for me, but it could make a massive difference for our dad. I tried to explain to Ethan about the pattern of lending money without repayment, but he said that keeping score of money between family members was wrong. He said that parents sacrifice for their children without expecting repayment, and that children should do the same for their parents when needed. Ethan said that our dad was going through a rough patch and needed emotional and financial support from his family. He accused me of being selfish and said that I was prioritizing money over family relationships. The conversation with Ethan made me doubt my decision. Maybe I'm being too harsh by cutting off financial support completely. Maybe I should help with this one more emergency and then set boundaries going forward. But I also feel like I've been enabling my dad's poor financial management by constantly bailing him out. The money I've lent him could have been used for my own emergency fund or financial goals, and I'm starting to resent the assumption that I should always be available to solve his money problems. Am I the bad person for refusing to lend my dad money again when he's never paid back what he's already borrowed from me? That story wraps up there, and your dad has turned you into his personal bank without any of the benefits. $4,000 in unpaid loans, while he's posting expensive dinners and weekend trips on social media shows exactly where his priorities are. Ethan's comment about not keeping score between family is convenient when he's not the one being treated like an ATM. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling someone's irresponsible behavior, even when they guilt trip you about it. Time for a story about someone dealing with a family member who apparently thinks your social life exists for their entertainment. Am I the bad person for not wanting my brother's girlfriend at family dinner? My brother Josh has been dating his girlfriend Amber for about 8 months, and she started coming to our weekly family dinners. The problem is that Amber seems to think it's entertaining to mock me and make jokes at my expense throughout the entire meal, and I'm getting tired of pretending it doesn't bother me. At first, I thought Amber was just trying to be funny and fit in with our family's sense of humour. We do tend to tease each other, but it's usually good-natured and everyone gets to be both the joker and the target. But with Amber, I'm always the target, and her comments aren't playful teasing, they're just mean. Last week at dinner, Amber made fun of my job, saying that working in customer service must be really fulfilling, and that she couldn't imagine doing something so mind-numbing. When I tried to explain that I actually enjoy helping people solve problems, she said that was probably because I like simple tasks that don't require much thinking. She constantly comments on my appearance in ways that are clearly meant to be insulting. She'll say things like, "That's an interesting outfit choice," or "I love how confident you are to wear your hair like that." She frames these as compliments, but the tone makes it obvious that she's being sarcastic. Amber also makes jokes about my dating life, or lack thereof. She'll ask loudly if I'm seeing anyone yet, and when I say no, she'll make comments about how I'm probably too picky or suggest that I should lower my standards. She once said that maybe I should try online dating because meeting people in person clearly wasn't working for me. The worst part is that she does all of this in front of our entire family, and Josh just laughs along with her. He seems to think her comments are hilarious, and he never steps in to defend me or tell her to back off. Sometimes he'll even add his own jokes to pile on. My parents try to change the subject when Amber's comments get too mean, but they don't directly address her behaviour either. I think they're trying to keep the peace and not make Josh feel like his girlfriend isn't welcome, but their silence makes me feel like I'm expected to just tolerate being treated badly. 2 weeks ago, Amber made a comment about how I must save a lot of money on dates since I never go on any. The whole table went quiet for a moment, and I could see that even my parents thought she'd crossed a line. But then Josh started laughing and said that Amber was just being funny, and the moment passed. I finally decided I'd had enough and asked Josh if we could talk privately after dinner. I explained that Amber's comments were hurtful and that I didn't want to be her target for jokes anymore. I asked him to talk to her about toning down the personal attacks. Josh got defensive immediately and said that Amber was just trying to fit in with our family's humour. He said that we all joke around with each other, so I shouldn't take her comments personally. He accused me of being too sensitive and said that Amber's jokes weren't any worse than the teasing we'd always done as siblings. I tried to explain that there was a difference between mutual teasing and one person constantly being targeted by someone else, but Josh said I was overreacting. He said that Amber liked me and was just trying to bond with me through humour. When I pointed out that her jokes were always at my expense and never the other way around, Josh said that was because I didn't make an effort to participate in the banter. He said that if I wanted to dish it out, I had to be willing to take it too. Oh. I told Josh that I didn't want to spend family dinners being insulted and that I was going to start skipping them if Amber was going to continue treating me this way. Josh said I was being dramatic and that I was trying to make him choose between his girlfriend and his family. Josh said that Amber made him happy and that she was going to be around for the long term. He said that I needed to learn to get along with her instead of trying to exclude her from family events. He accused me of being jealous that he had a girlfriend and said that I was taking out my loneliness on his relationship. The conversation ended with Josh saying that Amber would continue coming to family dinners and that I could either deal with it like an adult or stay home. He said he wasn't going to ask his girlfriend to change her personality just because I couldn't take a joke. Since then, I've been skipping family dinners and my parents have started asking questions about why I'm not coming anymore. I haven't told them the full details about my conversation with Josh because I don't want to create more family drama. Josh has been telling people that I'm being antisocial and that I'm to exclude trying Amber from the "I'm jealous of their family" because relationship. He's making me sound petty and unreasonable while completely ignoring the fact that his girlfriend has been consistently mean to me. My parents called me yesterday asking if everything was okay and saying that they miss having me at family dinners. I want to tell them what's really going on, but I'm worried that it will cause a big family fight and make things even more uncomfortable. Am I the bad person for not wanting my brother's girlfriend at family dinner because she constantly makes jokes at my expense? Or should I just tolerate her behaviour to keep the peace? That story ends there, and Josh is completely missing the point if he thinks what Amber does counts as normal family teasing. Real banter goes both ways and stops when someone gets hurt, but Amber has turned you into her personal comedy target. The fact that Josh laughs along instead of defending you shows he's more interested in impressing his girlfriend than protecting his sibling. You shouldn't have to endure weekly insults just so someone else can feel comfortable bringing their mean-spirited partner to dinner. Moving along to our next story, which shows what happens when family members think your hospitality comes without limits. Am I the bad person for refusing to host Christmas this year? For the past 6 years, I've been hosting Christmas dinner for our entire extended family. It started when my grandmother got too old to handle the cooking and organising, and I volunteered to take over because I enjoy cooking and have a house with enough space for everyone. What began as hosting 12 people has grown into a massive production. Last year, I cooked for 28 people, including cousins, their spouses, their kids, and various family friends who somehow got added to the guest list over the years. The preparation takes weeks, the cooking takes 2 full days, and the cleanup afterward is exhausting. I don't mind the work when I feel like people appreciate the effort I put in, but over the years I've started to feel like I'm being taken for granted. Family members show up empty-handed expecting a full feast, leave messes throughout my house, and treat me more like hired help than the host who's doing them a favour. Last Christmas was particularly difficult. My sister Rachel showed up 3 hours late with her kids, who immediately started running around my house, unsupervised, while she sat down and asked when dinner would be ready. Her youngest son broke one of my grandmother's antique ornaments, and Rachel just shrugged and said, "Kids will be kids," without offering to replace it, or even apologising properly. My cousin Mike brought his new girlfriend without asking, then complained that I hadn't made enough vegetarian options for her. My uncle Frank got drunk and started arguing politics at the dinner table, making everyone uncomfortable. By the end of the night, I had wine stains on my carpet, food ground into my couch cushions, and dishes stacked to the ceiling. The breaking point came when I was cleaning up at midnight and found that someone had used my master bathroom and left it in a disgusting state. I spent my Christmas night scrubbing toilet bowls and wiping down walls while my family went home to their clean houses after eating the meal I'd spent weeks preparing. After that experience, I decided I needed a break. I'm going through a difficult period at work, I'm dealing with some health issues, and I'm emotionally exhausted from trying to maintain everyone else's Christmas traditions while neglecting my own needs. In October, I called Rachel and told her that I wouldn't be hosting Christmas this year. I explained that I was feeling overwhelmed and needed to step back from the responsibility. I suggested that maybe we could rotate hosting duties among different family members, or perhaps have Christmas at a restaurant where everyone could split the bill. Rachel was immediately upset and accused me of ruining Christmas for the entire family. She said that hosting Christmas was my role in the family and that everyone was counting on me to continue the tradition. She pointed out that I have the biggest house and the most cooking experience, so it made sense for me to host. I tried to explain that hosting had become too much work for one person and that I needed help or a break, but Rachel said I was being selfish. She said that Christmas was about family, not about my personal convenience, and that I should be willing to make sacrifices to bring everyone together. When I suggested that she could host this year, Rachel said her house was too small and her kitchen wasn't equipped for cooking for so many people. She said that changing the location would ruin the Christmas magic for all the kids who were used to celebrating at my house. Word spread quickly through the family about my decision not to host, and I started getting calls from various relatives expressing their disappointment. My cousin Sarah said I was destroying a cherished family tradition and that my grandmother would be heartbroken if she knew I was giving up on Christmas. My Aunt Linda called to say that Christmas wouldn't feel the same anywhere else and that I was being unfair to the children who looked forward to our annual celebration. She said that hosting was a privilege and an honor, and that I should be grateful for the opportunity to bring the family together. The pressure intensified when my mother got involved. She called me crying and said that I was breaking apart the family by refusing to host Christmas. She said that our Christmas celebrations were the one time each year when everyone came together, and that without my hosting, the tradition would die completely. My mother reminded me of all the work my grandmother had put into Christmas celebrations over the years, and said that I was dishonoring her memory by giving up on the tradition she'd passed down to me. She said that being the Christmas host was both a responsibility and a legacy. Several family members have suggested compromises, like everyone bringing a dish to share or helping with cleanup. But these offers feel hollow given that similar promises have been made and broken in previous years. People say they'll help, but when Christmas actually arrives, I always end up doing most of the work myself. My brother Tom called to say that he understood I was tired, but that I was making a mistake by stepping away from hosting. He said that being the Christmas host gave me an important role in the family, and that I'd regret giving up that position. He warned me that if someone else started hosting, I might lose my central place in family gatherings. The situation has created lasting tension because no one else has stepped up to host Christmas. Rachel keeps insisting her house is too small. My parents say they're too old to handle the work. And my other relatives have various excuses about why they can't take over hosting duties. As Christmas approaches, it looks like we might not have a family celebration at all this year. Some family members are making their own plans or accepting invitations from friends, while others are still hoping I'll change my mind and agree to host. Rachel has been passive-aggressive about the whole situation, making comments about how some people care more about themselves than family traditions. She's been telling people that I'm destroying Christmas out of laziness and that the family's falling apart because I won't step up to my responsibilities. I feel guilty about the possibility that we won't have a family Christmas, but I also feel resentful that I'm being blamed for a situation that could easily be solved if someone else was willing to host, or if we found an alternative celebration location. Am I the bad person for refusing to host Christmas this year after 6 years of handling all the work and receiving little appreciation for my efforts? That story comes to an end, and honestly, the entitlement here is staggering. Rachel can complain about ruined traditions all she wants, but she's not willing to lift a finger to preserve them herself. 6 years of thankless labour that ends with you scrubbing toilets at midnight while everyone goes home is more than enough. The fact that no one else will step up proves they all know exactly how much work it really is. You're not destroying Christmas. You're just refusing to be the family's unpaid caterer anymore. Our last story for this section deals with someone whose living space apparently doesn't have the boundaries other people think it should. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my sister move into my apartment? My sister Julia called me last month, asking if she and her 2 kids could move in with me temporarily while she gets back on her feet financially. She's going through a divorce and says she needs somewhere to stay for a few months while she saves up for her own place. The problem is that I live in a 1-bedroom apartment that's barely big enough for me, let alone 3 additional people. My living room doubles as my home office, and I literally don't have space for even 1 extra person to sleep comfortably, let alone a woman and 2 children, ages 6 and 9. When I explained the space limitations to Julia, she said that her kids could sleep on air mattresses in the living room and she could take the couch. She said it would only be temporary and that they'd make it work somehow. She seemed to think that the logistics would just figure themselves out. I tried to explain that my apartment isn't suitable for children. I live on a busy street with no yard or safe play area. The building doesn't allow pets, which would mean Julia's kids would have to give up their dog that they're already attached to. The school district is different from where they currently live, which would disrupt their education. Julia said I was making excuses and that if I really cared about family, I'd find a way to make the situation work. She said that her kids were adaptable and that a temporary school change wouldn't hurt them. She accused me of prioritizing my convenience over my family's well-being. I explained that it wasn't just about convenience, but about practicality. My apartment has thin walls, and my neighbours have complained about noise in the past. Adding 2 children to a space that's not designed for families would likely cause problems with my landlord and possibly result in eviction for violating occupancy limits. Julia said I was being selfish and that she'd do anything to help me if I was in her situation. She pointed out that she'd let me stay with her when I was between apartments 5 years ago and said that I owed her the same consideration now that she needed help. I reminded Julia that when I stayed with her, I slept on her couch for 2 weeks while apartment hunting, and I was a single adult who didn't disrupt her household routine. Her situation involved moving 3 people into a space designed for 1 person for an indefinite period of time. Julia got emotional and said that she was facing homelessness and that I was her only option. She said that her ex-husband wasn't paying child support yet and that she'd been staying with friends who couldn't accommodate them much longer. She made it sound like I was the difference between her children having a roof over their heads or living on the street. I felt terrible hearing about her situation, but I also knew that my apartment genuinely wasn't a viable solution for her housing needs. I suggested that she look into temporary housing assistance programs or reach out to other family members who might have more appropriate space. Julia said that she'd already asked everyone else and that they'd all found reasons to say no. She said that I was her last hope and that she couldn't believe her own sister would abandon her during the worst time in her life. When I maintained that my apartment wasn't suitable, Julia accused me of lying about caring about her and her children. She said that if I really loved them, I'd make any sacrifice necessary to keep them safe and housed. She said that people who truly care about family don't worry about inconvenience when lives are at stake. The conversation ended with Julia crying and saying that she'd remember who was there for her when she really needed help. She said that she'd thought she could count on me, but that I'd proven family didn't mean as much to me as it meant to her. Since then, Julia has been telling other family members about my refusal to help, and several relatives have reached out to express their disappointment in my decision. My aunt called to say that Julia is desperate and that I should reconsider my position. My cousin texted me saying that having Julia and her kids stay with me would be difficult, but that it was the right thing to do for family. She said that sometimes being a good sister means making sacrifices, even when they're inconvenient. I've been second-guessing my decision because I do love Julia and her kids, and I hate the thought of them being homeless. But I also know that my apartment genuinely can't accommodate 3 additional people safely or legally, and that the situation would likely create problems for everyone involved. Am I the bad person for refusing to let my sister and her children move into my 1-bedroom apartment, even though she says she has nowhere else to go? That story ends there, and Julia is asking you to perform miracles with physics and housing laws. A 1-bedroom apartment can't magically expand to safely house 4 people just because someone needs it to. The guilt trip about family loyalty is particularly manipulative when she's asking you to risk your own housing stability and potentially break your lease agreement. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is acknowledge when a solution won't actually work, rather than creating a bigger disaster for everyone involved. Let's dive into our next story about someone dealing with family expectations around major life events. Am I the bad person for not attending my dad's birthday party? My dad is turning 60 this weekend, and my stepmom organised a big party for him at their house. The whole extended family is supposed to be there, plus his work friends and neighbours. It sounds like it's going to be a really nice celebration, but I decided not to go. The thing is, my relationship with my dad has been strained for years. After my parents divorced when I was 12, he remarried pretty quickly and started this whole new life with my stepmom and her kids. He moved to their house across town, and suddenly I felt like I was just a weekend obligation rather than his actual daughter. Throughout high school, I'd go to his place every other weekend, like the custody agreement said, but it never felt like home. My stepmom would make comments about how I was too quiet or too moody, and my dad never defended me. He seemed more interested in keeping his new wife happy than making sure I felt welcome in what was supposed to be my second home too. When I graduated high school, my dad missed my graduation party because it conflicted with my stepbrother's baseball tournament. He said the tournament was important for college scouts and that my party was just a casual family thing that could be rescheduled. That really hurt because I'd been looking forward to celebrating with him. College made the distance between us even worse. My dad would call maybe once a month, and our conversations were always awkward and surface level. He'd ask about my grades and tell me about his new job or home improvement projects, but we never talked about anything meaningful. When I got engaged last year, I called to tell him the news. He seemed happy for me, but then immediately started asking about the wedding budget and whether I'd considered having it at his country club. It felt like he was more interested in showing off to his friends than actually celebrating my happiness. The final straw came 6 months ago when my grandmother, his mother, was in the hospital. She'd had a stroke and we weren't sure if she was going to recover. I drove 4 hours to be with her, and I was shocked to find that my dad hadn't even visited yet. He said he was busy with work and would come when he could. My grandmother died 3 days later, and my dad showed up to the funeral, acting like the grieving son. But I knew that I'd spent more time with her in those final days than he had in months. He gave this emotional eulogy about what a wonderful mother she'd been, and I just felt angry that he was performing grief for people who didn't know how absent he'd actually been. After the funeral, my cousin Sarah pulled me aside and said that I seemed really bitter toward my dad. She said that holding grudges was toxic and that life was too short to stay angry at family members. She pointed out that my dad had seemed genuinely sad about losing his mother, and that maybe his way of coping was different from mine. Sarah suggested that I should make more effort to rebuild our relationship while there was still time. She said that when parents get older, adult children often regret not spending more time with them. She made me feel guilty for being distant, like I was the one causing problems in our relationship. But when my stepmom called to invite me to the birthday party, I just couldn't bring myself to say yes. The thought of sitting there pretending everything was fine between us while he played the role of loving father in front of all his friends felt exhausting. I told my stepmom that I wouldn't be able to make it because of work commitments. She seemed disappointed and said that my dad would be really hurt if I didn't come to such an important milestone birthday. She mentioned that they'd already told people I'd be there and that my absence would be noticed. My stepmom said that regardless of whatever issues I had with my dad, this party was about celebrating his life and showing him love on his special day. She said that family disagreements shouldn't overshadow important occasions and that I'd regret missing it. When my dad called me directly to ask why I wasn't coming, I tried to stick to the work excuse, but he pressed me for details. Finally, I told him that I didn't feel comfortable coming to the party when we barely have a relationship anymore. I said that it would feel fake to show up and act like we're close when we're essentially strangers. My dad got quiet for a long time, then said that he knew we'd grown apart, but that he'd hoped we could work on rebuilding our connection. He said that skipping his birthday felt like I was giving up on our relationship entirely. He asked what he could do to fix things between us. I told him that it wasn't something that could be fixed with one conversation or one party. I said that years of feeling like a low priority in his life had created distance that couldn't be bridged by showing up to eat cake and pretend everything was fine. My dad said he understood that he'd made mistakes as a father, but that he'd always loved me and wanted me in his life. He said that missing his 60th birthday would hurt him deeply and that he hoped I'd reconsider. After we hung up, I started second-guessing my decision. Maybe I was being too harsh by skipping such an important birthday. Maybe showing up would be the first step toward rebuilding our relationship instead of driving us further apart. But I also felt like going to the party would be dishonest. I'd be there physically while feeling emotionally disconnected, and that seemed worse than just being honest about where our relationship actually stands. My cousin Sarah called me yesterday and said that my dad had been telling people I might not be able to make it to the party, and that he seemed really sad about it. She said that even if our relationship was complicated, missing his 60th birthday was something I'd probably regret later. Sarah pointed out that my dad was getting older and that there wouldn't be unlimited opportunities to spend time with him. She said that sometimes being the bigger person means showing up even when relationships are imperfect. I'm torn because I don't want to hurt my dad, but I also don't want to participate in pretending our relationship is something it's not. Going to the party feels dishonest, but staying home feels cruel. Am I the bad person for not attending my dad's birthday party when our relationship has been distant for years? That story ends there. This is heartbreaking because both of you are probably right about different things. Years of feeling deprioritized don't just disappear because someone turns 60, and showing up to fake happiness sounds exhausting. But Sarah has a point about limited time and missed opportunities. Sometimes the hardest relationships require the most courage to show up for, even when it feels impossible. Maybe the party isn't about pretending everything's fine, but about taking one small step towards something better. Our next story comes from someone dealing with a roommate who apparently thinks basic hygiene is optional. Am I the bad person for throwing out my roommate's rotten food? I live with my roommate Tyler in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we generally get along pretty well. We split the rent and utilities evenly, take turns cleaning common areas, and usually respect each other's space and belongings. But last month something happened that's created a lot of tension between us. Tyler had bought this package of ground beef about 3 weeks ago with plans to make tacos for dinner. He put it in the refrigerator and then apparently completely forgot about it. I didn't think much of it at first because we both buy groceries and sometimes ingredients sit around for a while before we get around to using them. After about a week, I started noticing a weird smell coming from the refrigerator every time I opened it. It wasn't overwhelming at first, just this slightly off odor that I couldn't quite identify. I figured maybe something had spilled or there was some leftover food going bad that one of us would eventually find and clean up. The smell got progressively worse over the next few days. By the second week, opening the refrigerator was genuinely unpleasant. The odor was this sour, rancid smell that would hit you immediately when you opened the door. It was starting to affect everything else in the fridge too, like the smell was seeping into other foods. I started looking around, trying to figure out where the smell was coming from. I checked the vegetable drawer, looked behind containers, and examined all the leftovers. Finally, I found Tyler's package of ground beef shoved in the back corner of the bottom shelf. The package was swollen up like a balloon and had this greenish tint to it. It was clearly completely rotten. I knocked on Tyler's bedroom door to let him know about the beef situation. He was in the middle of a video game and seemed annoyed that I was interrupting him. When I told him about the rotten meat, he just said, "Okay," and went back to his game. He didn't get up to deal with it or even seem particularly concerned about it. I figured he'd take care of it later that day or the next morning, so I left it alone. But 2 more days went by and the smell was getting so bad that I was starting to feel nauseous every time I went into the kitchen. The whole apartment was beginning to smell like rotting meat, and I was embarrassed to have friends over. I approached Tyler again and asked when he was planning to throw out the spoiled beef. He seemed irritated that I was bringing it up again and said he'd get to it when he had time. He said it wasn't bothering him that much and that I was being overly sensitive about a little smell. At this point, the meat had been rotting in our refrigerator for almost 3 weeks. The package was so bloated, it looked like it might burst, and the smell was so strong that I could detect it from the living room. I was worried it might contaminate other food or attract bugs to our apartment. I decided I couldn't wait any longer and threw the rotten meat away myself. I double-bagged it, tied it tight, and put it directly into the dumpster outside so the smell wouldn't linger in our kitchen trash can. I also spent about an hour cleaning out the refrigerator with bleach to try to eliminate the odour. When Tyler came home that evening and went to the kitchen, he immediately started yelling about his missing ground beef. I explained that I'd thrown it out because it had been rotting for weeks and was making the whole apartment smell terrible. Tyler absolutely exploded. He said I had no right to touch his food and that throwing out his groceries was basically stealing from him. He said the beef had cost him $12 and that I owed him money to replace it. He accused me of being controlling and said that just because I was bothered by the smell didn't give me the right to dispose of his property. I tried to explain that the meat was completely inedible and potentially hazardous to keep around, but Tyler said that wasn't my decision to make. He said that even if the food was spoiled, I should have asked permission before throwing it away. He claimed he might have been planning to return it to the store for a refund. Tyler said that the meat was his property and that I'd violated his trust by disposing of it without permission. He said that if I had a problem with the smell, I should have just avoided the kitchen until he decided to deal with it himself. He accused me of being impatient and disrespectful of his belongings. The argument escalated when Tyler said that my action showed I didn't respect him as a roommate and that I thought I could make decisions about his stuff whenever I felt like it. He said that throwing out his food was a violation of our living arrangement and that he couldn't trust me not to mess with his things in the future. I pointed out that the rotten meat was affecting our shared living space and that I'd asked him multiple times to dispose of it before taking action myself. I said that letting food rot for 3 weeks wasn't reasonable and that it was creating an unsanitary condition in our apartment. Tyler said that timeline didn't matter and that his food was his responsibility to deal with on his own schedule. He said that I was being dramatic about a little smell and that I should have just dealt with it if it bothered me so much. Since then, Tyler has been cold and hostile toward me. He barely speaks to me and makes passive-aggressive comments about people who can't mind their own business. He's also started keeping all his food in a mini fridge in his bedroom, which he says is to protect his groceries from me. Some of our mutual friends have heard about the situation, and opinions are split. A few people think Tyler was being unreasonable by letting food rot for weeks, and that I was right to clean up the health hazard. Others think I should have respected his property and found another solution, like asking our landlord to intervene or just avoiding the kitchen entirely. Tyler still insists that I owe him $12 for the meat, and he brings it up regularly. He says that until I replace what I threw away, he can't trust me to respect his belongings. He's made it clear that he considers my action to be theft and a major violation of roommate boundaries. Am I the bad person for throwing out my roommate's rotten ground beef after it had been decomposing in our shared refrigerator for 3 weeks? That story ends there. Tyler is completely delusional if he thinks keeping rotten meat for 3 weeks is normal roommate behaviour. You gave him multiple chances to handle it himself before the situation became a genuine health hazard. The fact that he's demanding $12 for meat that was literally toxic shows he's more interested in being right than being reasonable. You probably saved both of you from food poisoning or a bug infestation. Let's move on to a story about family members who think your financial success comes with automatic obligations. Am I the bad person for not paying for my brother's wedding suit? My brother Mark is getting married next month and asked me to be his best man, which I was honoured to do. I've been helping with wedding planning, organising the bachelor party, and doing all the typical best man duties. But last week, Mark asked me to pay for his wedding suit, and when I said no, it created a huge conflict. Mark explained that his wedding budget was getting tight and that he'd underestimated how expensive everything would be. He said that between the venue, catering, flowers, and his fiancée Jessica's dress, they were running out of money for his suit. He asked if I could cover the cost as part of my best man responsibilities. The suit he wanted cost about $400 from a Men's Warehouse store. He said it wasn't anything too fancy, just a basic black suit that he'd be able to wear again for other occasions. He made it sound like it was a reasonable request and that paying for the groom's suit was something best men typically did. I was surprised by the request because I'd never heard of best men being expected to pay for the groom's clothing. I've been in a few weddings before, and the groomsmen usually just pay for their own suits or tuxedo rentals. The groom's outfit was always something the couple handled themselves. I told Mark that I wasn't comfortable paying for his suit, but that I'd be happy to help him look for more affordable options or see if there were any sales coming up. I offered to go shopping with him to find something within his budget, or to help him look into renting a suit instead of buying one. Mark got frustrated and said that he'd already found the perfect suit and didn't want to compromise on his wedding day look. He said that $400 wasn't that much money for someone with my income, and that I should want to help make his wedding perfect. I explained that while I do make decent money, I also have my own expenses and financial goals. I said that I'd already spent money on the bachelor party, my own suit for the wedding, and various other best man expenses. Adding another $400 was more than I'd budgeted for this wedding. Mark said I was being selfish and that a good best man would do whatever it takes to support the groom. He pointed out that he'd chosen me for this important role and that he expected me to step up when he needed help. He said that my refusal was letting him down when he was counting on me most. I tried to suggest alternatives again, like splitting the cost with other groomsmen or asking his parents if they could help with the suit. Mark said he didn't want to ask anyone else for money and that as his best man, I was the obvious person to handle this expense. The conversation got more tense when Mark said that if I really supported his marriage and wanted him to look good on his wedding day, I'd find a way to help with the suit cost. He said that he'd remember who was there for him when he really needed support, and who made excuses when asked to help. I told Mark that I'd already done a lot to support his wedding, and that paying for his clothing wasn't a reasonable expectation. I said that I was happy to be his best man, but that didn't mean I was responsible for covering his wedding expenses. Mark ended the conversation by saying he was disappointed in me, and that he'd expected more from his brother and best man. He said that $400 was apparently worth more to me than his happiness on his wedding day. The next day, Mark's fiancée Jessica called me. She said that Mark had told her about our conversation and that she was disappointed in my response. She said that the wedding was already stressing them out financially and that my refusal to help with the suit was adding to their problems. Jessica said that she'd assumed I would want to help make their wedding day perfect and that my reaction had surprised both of them. She said that Mark was really hurt by my refusal and that it was creating tension during what should be a happy time. Jessica asked if I'd reconsider helping with the suit cost, even if it was just a portion of the total. She said that any contribution would be appreciated and would show that I supported their marriage. She made it sound like my willingness to help was a test of how much I cared about them. I explained to Jessica that I'd already contributed significantly to their wedding through bachelor party expenses and other best man duties. I said that I wanted their wedding to be perfect, but that I didn't think paying for the groom's suit was my responsibility. Jessica said she understood that I'd already spent money on wedding-related things, but that the suit was a special case because Mark really needed help. She said that sometimes family has to step up during important life events, even when it's not technically required. Since then, Mark has been distant and cold toward me. He still wants me to be his best man, but our interactions have been strained and awkward. He makes comments about people who say they support you, but don't follow through when it matters. Some family members have heard about the situation and have mixed opinions. My parents think Mark was wrong to expect me to pay for his suit, but my aunt said that sometimes family members need to make sacrifices for important occasions like weddings. My cousin said that $400 isn't that much money in the context of a wedding, and that I should consider helping if I can afford it. But my other brother said that Mark was being unreasonable, and that asking the best man to pay for the groom's clothing crossed a line. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and I'm dreading the awkwardness of fulfilling my best man duties while this conflict is unresolved. Mark clearly feels like I've failed him as a brother and best man, while I feel like he's taking advantage of our relationship to solve his financial problems. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my brother's wedding suit when he asked me as his best man? That story wraps up there. Mark is confusing being a best man with being a personal ATM. Best man duties include planning the bachelor party and giving a speech, not funding the groom's wardrobe because he didn't budget properly. The fact that Jessica jumped in to pressure you shows they planned this tag team guilt trip together. Wedding expenses belong to the couple getting married, not their unpaid wedding party volunteers. Time for another story about someone whose generosity got taken for granted in Way. Am I the bad person, the worst for refusing to help my cousin move again? Last year, I spent an entire weekend helping my cousin Daniel move from his apartment across town into a new place closer to his job. It was exhausting work involving 3 trips with a rented truck, carrying heavy furniture up 2 flights of stairs and dealing with his complete lack of organisation. But I did it because that's what family does for each other. The move was supposed to be temporary, just until Daniel could find something better. He said the new apartment was okay, but not ideal, and that he'd probably move again within a year, once he saved up more money for a deposit on a nicer place. Daniel didn't offer to pay me for my time, or even cover gas money for my truck, which I didn't mind at the time. He bought pizza for lunch and seemed genuinely grateful for the help. He said he couldn't have done it without me, and that he'd return the favour if I ever needed help moving. Throughout the year, Daniel would occasionally mention that he was looking at other apartments and planning his next move. He'd show me listings online and ask for my opinion about different neighbourhoods and rent prices. I assumed he was just casually browsing and planning ahead. 3 weeks ago, Daniel called me and announced that he'd found the perfect apartment and was moving at the end of the month. He said the new place was bigger, in a better area, and only $50 more per month in rent. He seemed excited about the upgrade and was already making plans for how he'd arrange his furniture. Then Daniel said he was counting on me to help with the move again, just like last time. He said he'd already told his new landlord that he'd be able to move in on Saturday, and he needed my truck and my help carrying everything. He spoke like it was already decided and that I'd automatically be available. I was caught off guard because Daniel hadn't asked if I was available or if I was willing to help. He'd just assumed that I'd spend another weekend doing manual labour for him without even checking my schedule first. I had actually made plans for that weekend to visit friends who were in town for a limited time. I told Daniel that I couldn't help with his move because I already had commitments that weekend. I explained that I'd made plans weeks ago and couldn't cancel them on short notice. I offered to help him find a moving company or see if other family members were available instead. Daniel immediately got upset and said that I was abandoning him when he needed help most. He said that moving companies were expensive and that he'd been counting on my assistance to make the move affordable. He reminded me that I'd helped him before and said he couldn't understand why I wouldn't do it again. I tried to explain that the difference was he'd asked for help last time, while this time he just assumed I'd be available without checking with me first. I said that I was willing to help family when I could, but that I couldn't drop everything whenever he decided to move. Daniel said that I was being selfish and that family should be a priority over social plans with friends. He pointed out that he rarely asked me for favours and that helping him move wasn't that big of a deal. He said that good cousins would rearrange their schedules to help with something so important. I told Daniel that I understood moving was stressful, but that he needed to plan better and ask for help in advance, rather than expecting people to be automatically available. I said that I'd already helped him move once, and that it was unreasonable to expect me to do it because he'd decide again just to move somewhere else. Daniel got angry and said that I was acting like helping him move was some huge burden when it was just one day of help work. He said that the I'd given him last year apparently didn't mean anything to me, since I wasn't willing to do it again when he needed it. The conversation escalated when Daniel accused me of being lazy and not caring about family. He said that he'd always thought he could count on me, but that my refusal showed him where he really stood in my priorities. He said that if R were reversed, he'd help positions me without question. I pointed out that Daniel had moved twice in 2 years, and that constantly helping people move was exhausting and time-consuming. I said that I'd been happy to help once, but that it wasn't my responsibility to be his personal moving crew every time he decided to change apartments. Daniel said I was exaggerating and that 2 moves in 2 years wasn't excessive. He said that people move for good reasons and that I should support his efforts to improve his living situation rather than complaining about having to help. Since then, Daniel has been telling other family members that I refused to help him when he needed it most. He's framed the situation as me being unwilling to spend one day helping family, without mentioning that I'd already helped him move before, or that he'd assumed my availability without asking. My aunt called to ask why I wouldn't help Daniel with his move, and said that family should support each other during big life changes. She said that moving is stressful, and that Daniel really needed help from people he could trust. I tried to explain that I'd already helped Daniel move once, and that I had prior commitments this time. But my aunt said that sounded like I was making excuses. She said that sometimes family obligations require sacrificing other plans, and that Daniel would remember who was there for him when he needed help. Daniel ended up hiring movers for the big furniture and getting some friends to help with boxes, so his move happened successfully without me. But he's been cold and distant ever since, and he makes passive-aggressive comments about people who can't be counted on when it matters. The whole situation has made me feel guilty because I do care about Daniel, and I don't want him to think I don't support him, but I also feel like he took my previous help for granted and expected me to be his go-to moving assistance whenever he felt like changing apartments. Am I the bad person for refusing to help my cousin move again after I'd already spent a weekend helping him move last year? That story ends there. Daniel learned nothing from your generosity last year, except that you're a free moving service he can summon on demand. The fact that he didn't even ask if you were available before making plans shows he considers your time completely disposable. You already proved you're a helpful family member, but that doesn't mean you signed up to be his personal moving company for life. Some people mistake kindness for a permanent obligation. Here's our next story about someone whose friend apparently thinks friendship comes with a price tag. Am I the bad person for not donating to my friend's GoFundMe? My friend Mia started a GoFundMe campaign last month to raise money for what she called mental health recovery and life rebuilding. She posted it on all her social media accounts and sent the link directly to friends and family members, asking for donations to help her get back on her feet after what she described as a difficult period in her life. The GoFundMe page had photos of Mia looking sad and tired, along with a long story about how she'd been struggling with depression and anxiety that had affected her ability to work consistently. She wrote about needing money for therapy sessions, medication, and basic living expenses while she focused on her mental health recovery. Mia set a goal of raising $5,000, which seemed like a lot of money to me. She broke down the costs in her campaign description, explaining that she needed money for rent, groceries, therapy co-pays, and what she called self-care essentials to support her healing process. I felt bad reading about Mia's struggles because I knew she'd been going through a tough time lately. She'd been posting a lot about feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and she'd mentioned that work had been difficult for her. I wanted to be supportive, but I was also dealing with my own financial challenges. I'm currently paying off student loans, trying to save for a car down payment, and living paycheck to paycheck myself. An unexpected expense of even $50 would strain my budget, and I honestly didn't have money to spare for donations, even for a friend who was struggling. I decided not to donate to the GoFundMe, but I did reach out to Mia privately to check on her and offer emotional support. I sent her a long message saying that I was thinking about her and asking if there were other ways I could help that didn't involve money. I offered to listen if she needed to talk or to spend time together doing free activities. Mia responded politely to my message and thanked me for reaching out. She didn't mention the GoFundMe directly, and I thought maybe she understood that not everyone could contribute financially, but that people cared about her in other ways. A few weeks went by and Mia's campaign was gaining some traction. She'd post updates about how grateful she was for donations and how much the support meant to her recovery process. She'd share screenshots of the rising total and thank people publicly for their generosity. Then last week, Mia posted in our group chat with several mutual friends. She sent a screenshot showing the names of people who had donated to her GoFundMe, along with a message thanking everyone who had contributed. She said she was overwhelmed by the support and wanted to acknowledge the friends who had stepped up to help her. The message felt pointed because it was obviously showing who had and hadn't donated. My name wasn't on the list, along with one other person in the group chat. It felt like she was publicly calling out the people who hadn't contributed money to her campaign. I felt embarrassed and guilty seeing that post, especially since it was in front of our mutual friends. It made me look like I didn't care about Mia's well-being or wasn't willing to support her during a difficult time. I worried that other people would judge me for not donating. Later that day, Mia sent me a private message asking if I'd seen her post about the donations. She said she'd noticed that I hadn't contributed yet and wondered if maybe I'd missed seeing the campaign or if there had been some technical issue preventing me from donating. I was put in an awkward position because I'd deliberately chosen not to donate, but Mia was acting like it must have been an oversight. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to explain my financial situation or justify why I couldn't afford to help. I told Mia honestly that I'd seen the GoFundMe but wasn't in a position to donate money right now. I explained that I was dealing with my own financial constraints and that I'd offered other forms of support instead. I reminded her about my message offering to spend time together or provide emotional support. Mia's response surprised me with how cold it was. She said that she understood not everyone could donate large amounts, but that even $5 or $10 would have shown that I cared about her well-being. She said that seeing some friends contribute while others didn't had shown her who really supported her during crisis times. Mia said that she'd been disappointed to see that I hadn't donated anything, especially since she'd always considered me a close friend. She pointed out that I'd spent money on things like coffee and meals out recently, based on my social media posts, and said that my priorities were clear. I felt defensive because Mia was essentially saying that any discretionary spending I did meant I should have been able to donate to her campaign. I tried to explain that my occasional coffee purchases didn't mean I had extra money for donations, and that everyone's financial situation was different. Mia said that she'd learned a lot about her friendships through this experience, and that it was clear who really cared about her versus who just offered empty words of support. She said that emotional support was nice, but that financial help was what she actually needed to get better. The conversation ended with Mia saying that she hoped I'd reconsider donating, even a small amount, to show that our friendship meant something to me. She said that she'd remember who was there for her during the hardest time in her life and who chose to prioritize their own comfort instead. Since then, Mia has been distant and cold toward me. She doesn't respond to my messages the way she used to, and she stopped including me in group plans. When we do interact, she's polite but formal, like we're acquaintances rather than friends who've known each other for years. Some of our mutual friends have mentioned the situation to me, with mixed reactions. A few people said they understood not being able to donate, and that Mia shouldn't have called people out publicly. Others said that even a small donation would have been a nice gesture, and that it was understandable why Mia felt hurt. One friend told me that she donated $20, even though she was also tight on money, because she felt like friendships sometimes requires small sacrifices. Another friend said that pressuring people to donate and then shaming those who couldn't was manipulative and unfair. I keep going back and forth between feeling guilty that I didn't find a way to donate something and feeling resentful that Mia turned her mental health crisis into a test of friendship loyalty. I want to support her, but I also feel like she crossed a line by publicly calling out who did and didn't contribute money. Am I the bad person for not donating to my friend's GoFundMe when she was asking for help with mental health recovery costs? That story comes to an end, and Mia completely weaponized her mental health struggles to guilt people into giving her money. Real friends don't keep public scorecards of who donated and then freeze out the people who couldn't afford to contribute. The fact that she's monitoring your coffee purchases to judge your spending priorities shows this was never about genuine need. Financial support isn't a requirement for friendship, and anyone who treats it that way isn't really your friend. Let's move into our next story about someone dealing with relationship pressure around therapy. Am I the bad person for refusing to go to couples therapy? My girlfriend Lily has been begging me to go to couples therapy with her for the past 3 months. She says our relationship has communication issues and that talking to a professional would help us work through our problems. But I don't think therapy is going to solve anything, and I've been refusing to go. Lily and I have been together for 2 years, and like any couple, we have our disagreements and arguments. She tends to get emotional during conflicts, while I prefer to stay calm and rational. She says I shut down when we fight, while I think she gets too worked up about things that aren't that serious. The issues Lily wants to address in therapy mostly center around what she calls my emotional unavailability. She says I don't share my feelings enough and that she feels like she doesn't really know what's going on inside my head. She wants me to be more open and vulnerable in our relationship. I've tried to explain to Lily that I'm not an emotional person by nature. I don't feel the need to analyze every feeling or talk through every minor issue that comes up. I show my love through actions rather than constantly discussing my emotions, and I thought that was enough. Lily disagrees and says that healthy relationships require both partners to be emotionally present and communicative. She's been reading relationship books and following therapy accounts on social media, and she's convinced that our problems fit some pattern that couples therapy could fix. When Lily first suggested therapy, I told her I wasn't interested. I said that we were capable of working out our own problems and that paying someone to listen to us talk didn't seem necessary. I pointed out that people have been having relationships for thousands of years without needing professional intervention. Lily got upset and said that my refusal to even consider therapy showed that I wasn't committed to improving our relationship. She said that if I really loved her, I'd be willing to try anything that might help us communicate better and be happier together. I told Lily that my refusal wasn't about not loving her, but about not believing that therapy would actually help. I said that our problems weren't that serious and that we just needed to keep working on things ourselves. I suggested that we could read relationship books together or find other ways to improve our communication. Lily said that she'd been trying to work on our relationship problems for months without seeing any real progress. She said that I kept promising to be more open and communicative, but that nothing actually changed in my behaviour. She felt like we were stuck in the same patterns and needed outside help to break through them. The pressure from Lily intensified when she started making therapy appointments and asking me to confirm specific dates and times. She'd found a couples therapist she liked and was ready to book sessions, but needed me to agree to attend. When I continued to refuse, she'd get frustrated and accuse me of not taking her concerns seriously. Lily said that my unwillingness to go to therapy was making her question our entire relationship. She said that if I wasn't willing to work on our problems professionally, maybe we weren't compatible for the long term. She started talking about how she needed a partner who was committed to growth and self-improvement. I felt like Lily was giving me an ultimatum, which made me even more resistant to the idea of therapy. I told her that I didn't respond well to pressure and that threatening our relationship wasn't going to make me more likely to agree to counselling. I said that healthy relationships shouldn't involve forcing your partner to do things they don't want to do. Lily said she wasn't trying to force me, but that she was being honest about what she needed in a relationship. She said that emotional intimacy and good communication were non-negotiable for her, and that therapy seemed like the best way to achieve those things with me. The situation came to a head last week when Lily scheduled a therapy appointment without telling me and then informed me that we had a session the next Tuesday. She said she'd already paid for it and that the therapist was expecting both of us to attend. She presented it as a done deal rather than a request. I was angry that Lily had made the appointment without my consent and told her I wouldn't be going. I said that scheduling therapy for me without asking was manipulative and disrespectful of my boundaries. I told her she could go by herself if she wanted to talk to a therapist, but that I wasn't participating. Lily started crying and said that my refusal was the final proof that I didn't care enough about our relationship to fight for it. She said that she'd been trying everything she could think of to improve our communication and that therapy was her last hope for us working out. Lily went to the therapy session alone and came back saying that the therapist had confirmed her concerns about our relationship dynamics. She said the therapist had explained that refusing to attend couples therapy was often a sign that someone wasn't fully invested in the relationship. Since then, Lily has been distant and sad. She says she's trying to decide whether she can accept being in a relationship with someone who won't work on emotional growth. She's been talking about maybe taking a break so we can both figure out what we want. I'm frustrated because I feel like Lily has decided that therapy is the only solution to our problems and won't consider other approaches. I don't think our relationship issues are serious enough to require professional intervention, and I resent being pressured into doing something that makes me uncomfortable. Some of our friends have opinions about the situation. A few people have told me that couples therapy isn't that big of a deal and that I should just go to make Lily happy. Others have said that no one should be forced into therapy and that Lily is being unreasonable by making it a relationship requirement. Am I the bad person for refusing to go to couples therapy when my girlfriend says it's necessary for our relationship to work? That story ends there. This is tough because both perspectives have some merit, but Lily scheduling an appointment without your consent was definitely crossing a boundary. Therapy only works when both people want to be there, so forcing someone into it rarely helps anyway. That said, when your partner is repeatedly telling you they're unhappy and need something to change, completely dismissing their solution without offering alternatives isn't great either. Maybe the real issue isn't therapy itself, but whether you two want the same things from this relationship. Time for our next story about someone facing pressure around a major relationship milestone. Am I the bad person for not wanting my girlfriend to move in with me yet? My girlfriend Emma and I have been dating for about 1.5 years, and she's been pushing really hard for us to move in together. She says that we need to have this conversation about living together because our relationship is getting serious and she's ready to take the next step. She's been bringing it up constantly for the past few weeks, and every time I tell her I'm not ready yet, she gets frustrated and accuses me of dragging my feet or not being committed to our future together. Emma's lease is up in 2 months, and she says it doesn't make sense for her to renew when we could be living together and splitting expenses. She's done the math on how much money we'd both save, and she keeps showing me apartment listings that she thinks would be perfect for us. She's already started talking about which of her furniture we'd keep and which of mine we'd get rid of. I care about Emma a lot, but I'm just not ready to live with someone yet. I've never lived with a romantic partner before, and it feels like a huge step that I want to be completely sure about before I take it. I like having my own space where I can decompress after work and not worry about anyone else's schedule or needs. When I try to explain this to Emma, she says that living together is the natural progression of our relationship, and that most couples our age have already moved in together by this point. She says that if I'm not ready after 1.5 years, maybe I'm never going to be ready, and she doesn't want to waste time on someone who isn't serious about building a future with her. Emma has started making comments about how I must not love her enough to want to live with her, or that I'm keeping one foot out the door because I don't see our relationship lasting long term. She says that refusing to move in together sends the message that I'm not fully invested in what we have. I've tried to reassure Emma that my hesitation isn't about not loving her or not seeing a future together. I've explained that I just need more time to feel ready for such a big step, and that rushing into living together might actually hurt our relationship if I'm not mentally prepared for it. But Emma says that I've had plenty of time to think about it, and that continuing to delay just proves I'm not serious about her. She's given me an ultimatum that we either move in together when her lease expires, or she's going to reconsider whether our relationship is going in the direction she wants. The pressure from Emma is making me feel anxious and resentful. I don't like being forced to make major life decisions on someone else's timeline, and I feel like she's not respecting my need to move at my own pace. At the same time, I can understand her frustration with feeling like our relationship isn't progressing. Some of my friends have told me that Emma is being reasonable, and that 1.5 years is long enough to know whether I want to live with someone. They say that my reluctance probably is sending mixed signals about my commitment level, and that I should either move forward or let her find someone who's ready for the same thing she is. Other friends have said that no one should be pressured into living with someone before they feel ready, and that Emma is being unfair by giving me an ultimatum. They think that healthy relationships involve respecting each other's boundaries and timelines, not forcing major decisions. Am I the bad person for not wanting my girlfriend to move in with me yet, even though she's ready and says our relationship needs to progress? That story ends there, and Emma's ultimatum approach isn't going to magically make you ready for something you're not comfortable with yet. Living together is a major step that affects everything from your daily routine to your financial obligations, and rushing into it because someone else is impatient usually backfires. If she can't respect that you need more time to feel confident about such a big decision, maybe that tells you something important about how she handles disagreements in general. Our next story comes from someone dealing with financial pressure in their relationship. Am I the bad person for not paying for my partner's credit card debt? My girlfriend Hannah moved in with me about 6 months ago, and everything has been going really well between us. We split the rent and utilities fairly, take turns buying groceries, and generally have a good system for managing our shared expenses. But last month, Hannah told me about her credit card debt and asked if I would help her pay it off, which created a big conflict between us. Hannah explained that she had racked up about $8,000 in credit card debt over the past few years, mostly from when she was in college and struggling to make ends meet. She said she'd been making minimum payments for years but wasn't making any real progress on paying down the principal balance because of the high interest rates. She showed me her credit card statements and explained how much she was paying each month just in interest charges. Hannah said that if she could pay off the debt faster, she'd save thousands of dollars in the long run and would be able to contribute more to our shared goals, like saving for a vacation or eventually buying a house together. Hannah suggested that since I make more money than she does and have better credit, I could either help her pay off the debt directly or co-sign for a personal loan at a lower interest rate. She said that investing in her financial health would benefit both of us since we're building a life together. I was uncomfortable with the request because the debt was from before we met, and I didn't feel responsible for financial decisions she'd made years ago. I explained that while I cared about her financial well-being, I wasn't comfortable taking on debt that I hadn't been involved in creating. Hannah got upset and said that I was treating our relationship like we were still just dating instead of recognizing that we were partners building a future together. She said that in serious relationships, people help each other with financial challenges, and that my refusal showed I wasn't fully committed to our partnership. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not being committed, but about maintaining healthy financial boundaries. I said that I'd be happy to help her create a budget or look for ways to increase her income, but that directly paying her debt felt like too much responsibility for someone else's past financial decisions. Hannah said I was being selfish, and that since I had savings while she was struggling with debt payments, I should want to help her get to a better financial position. She pointed out that we were living together and sharing expenses, so her financial stress was affecting our household anyway. I told Hannah that I understood her debt was stressful, but that I'd worked hard to build up my savings and didn't feel comfortable using that money to pay off someone else's credit cards. I suggested that she could look into debt consolidation options or speak with a financial counselor about strategies for paying it off more quickly. Hannah accused me of being stingy and said that people who really love each other make financial sacrifices to help their partners succeed. She said that my unwillingness to help with her debt made her question whether I saw our relationship as a real partnership or just a convenient living arrangement. The conversation got more heated when Hannah said that my attitude about money was selfish and that I was prioritizing my own financial security over her well-being. She said that if the situation were reversed, she would help me without hesitation, because that's what partners do for each other. I pointed out that Hannah had never been in a position to help me financially, so we couldn't really know how she'd react in that situation. I said that it was easy to say you'd help someone when you'd never actually face that choice with your own money on the line. Hannah said that comment was cruel and that I was basically calling her poor and unable to help others. She said that just because she had debt didn't mean she wasn't generous or willing to make sacrifices for people she loved. Since then, the atmosphere in our apartment has been tense and uncomfortable. Hannah has been cold toward me and makes passive-aggressive comments about people who hoard money while their partners struggle. She's also started keeping track of our shared expenses more carefully and questioning whether I'm paying my fair share of everything. Hannah told her sister about our argument, and her sister called me to say that I was being unreasonable. She said that $8,000 wasn't that much money for someone with my income, and that helping Hannah pay off her debt would show that I was serious about our relationship. I explained to Hannah's sister that it wasn't about the amount of money, but about the principle of not taking responsibility for debt I didn't help create. She said I was hiding behind principles to avoid helping someone I claimed to love, and that real partners support each other through financial difficulties. Some of my friends have mixed opinions about the situation. A few people have said that I'm right to maintain financial boundaries, and that taking on a partner's debt is a serious decision that shouldn't be made lightly. Others have suggested that since Hannah and I live together and share expenses, her financial problems do affect me indirectly. One friend pointed out that if Hannah and I break up, I'd have no way to recover the money I'd spent on her debt, which makes it different from other kinds of relationship investments. Another friend said that refusing to help with debt might indicate that I'm not ready for a serious, committed relationship. Hannah has been talking about moving out if we can't resolve this issue, saying that she can't be with someone who won't support her when she needs help. She's made it clear that she sees my refusal as a fundamental incompatibility in how we view partnership and financial responsibility. Am I the bad person for not wanting to pay off my partner's credit card debt that she accumulated before we met? That story wraps up there, and Hannah is basically asking you to pay for years of her financial decisions while framing it as a test of your love. $8,000 isn't pocket change, and debt from before your relationship started isn't something you automatically inherit just because you're living together. The fact that she's trying to guilt you into it and bringing in family members to pressure you shows she's more interested in getting her debt paid than respecting your boundaries around money. Time for our next story about someone whose social life, apparently, isn't their own. Am I the bad person for refusing to share my Netflix password with my brother? My brother Ethan has been using my Spotify account for about 2 years now, which I didn't mind initially because family plans exist for a reason, and I figured it was a nice way to help him save some money. But last week he asked if he could also use my Netflix password, and when I said no, it turned into a bigger conflict than I expected. Ethan lives with 2 roommates and said that none of them want to pay for Netflix since they already split the cost of other streaming services. He pointed out that I live alone and only use one screen most of the time, so sharing my account wouldn't really affect my viewing experience. I explained to Ethan that while I didn't mind sharing Spotify since music doesn't really have viewing limits, Netflix was different because multiple people using the same account could slow down my connection or interfere with my recommendations. I also mentioned that I sometimes watch shows on my laptop while cooking or cleaning, so I did use multiple screens occasionally. Ethan said I was being stingy over something that wouldn't cost me anything extra to share. He pointed out that I make more money than he does, and that Netflix is a small expense that I can easily afford, while it would be a stretch for his budget. I told Ethan that it wasn't about the money, but about wanting to keep some things separate. I explained that my Netflix account had my personal viewing history and recommendations that I didn't want to get mixed up with other people's preferences. I also said that sharing passwords for multiple accounts felt like it was getting excessive. Ethan got frustrated and accused me of being selfish. He said that he'd always shared things with me when we were growing up and that I was being hypocritical by drawing arbitrary lines about what I would and wouldn't share now that I was financially better off. I reminded Ethan that he was already using my Spotify account for free and that I wasn't asking him to contribute anything toward that subscription. I said that I was happy to help him in reasonable ways, but that sharing all my streaming accounts wasn't something I was comfortable with. Ethan said that my refusal proved I didn't really care about helping family and that I was more concerned with hoarding my streaming services than supporting my brother. He pointed out that our parents had always taught us to share with each other and that my attitude was disappointing. The conversation escalated when Ethan said that successful siblings are supposed to help their family members who are struggling more, and that my unwillingness to share a Netflix password showed how money had changed me for the worse. I told Ethan that I didn't think asking for multiple streaming passwords was reasonable and that he could afford to pay for Netflix if he really wanted it. I pointed out that he spent money on things like eating out and buying clothes, so entertainment subscriptions weren't completely outside his budget. Ethan said that comparing my discretionary spending to his wasn't fair, since I made significantly more money. He said that what felt like a small expense to me was actually a meaningful amount for someone in his financial position. Since then, Ethan has been making passive-aggressive comments about how some people become stingy when they get successful. He's also started asking me to pay for things when we go out together, saying that since I won't share my Netflix account, the least I can do is cover dinner occasionally. The situation came up again last weekend when we were at our parents' house for dinner. Ethan mentioned to our mum that I wouldn't let him use my Netflix account, and she said that sharing streaming passwords was normal between family members and that I should reconsider. Our mum pointed out that I'd used their various accounts when I was younger and getting established, and that now it was my turn to help my brother in small ways. She said that family should support each other and that refusing to share something so minor seemed petty. I tried to explain that I was already sharing my Spotify account and that I just wanted to keep Netflix separate, but our mum said she didn't understand why I'd draw that particular line. She made it sound like I was being unreasonable over something that wouldn't hurt me to share. Our dad stayed out of the conversation mostly, but he did mention that when he was our age, siblings helped each other out without keeping score. He said that small gestures of support were what kept families close, and that I might want to think about whether this was worth creating tension over. Since then, I've been questioning whether I'm being too rigid about this boundary. Part of me wonders if I should just give Ethan the Netflix password to avoid ongoing family drama. But another part of me feels like if I give in now, he'll keep asking for more things, and I'll never be able to set reasonable limits. Am I the bad person for refusing to share my Netflix password with my brother when he's already using my Spotify account? That story comes to an end, and Ethan is treating your streaming accounts like they're community property just because you're related. The fact that he's already getting free Spotify and still demanding more shows he's testing how much he can get away with, rather than genuinely needing help. Your mum's guilt trip about family sharing conveniently ignores that you're already sharing one service, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to keep at least one account to yourself. Let's move into our next story about workplace boundaries. Am I the bad person for not splitting my work bonus with my girlfriend? I got a really nice bonus at work last month, about $3,000, which was unexpected and exciting since I'd been working extra hours on a big project that ended up being really successful. When I told my girlfriend Chloe about the bonus, her immediate reaction was to start talking about how we should spend our money, which caught me off guard. Chloe started making we could do with the bonus suggestions about things money, like taking a vacation together or putting it toward a down payment fund for an apartment we could eventually buy together. She seemed to automatically assume that the money would be going towards shared goals rather than being something I'd decide how to use myself. I was confused by Chloe's assumption because while we've been dating for about a year and spend a lot of time together, we don't share finances or have joint accounts or anything like that. We split the cost of dates and activities pretty evenly, and we each handle our own personal expenses independently. When I mentioned that I was thinking about using the bonus to pay down my student loans, Chloe got upset and said that I was being selfish. She said that since we're in a serious relationship building a future together, my financial windfall should benefit both of us rather than just being used for my individual goals. I tried to explain that the bonus was compensation for extra work I'd done at my job, and that it felt like my personal money to use however I thought was best. I said that I was happy to continue splitting shared expenses equally, but that this bonus wasn't something I considered to be shared money. Chloe said that my attitude showed I wasn't thinking about our relationship as a real partnership. She pointed out that when good things happen to one partner, both people should benefit, and that hoarding money for individual purposes wasn't how couples were finances. I asked Suppose to handle Chloe if she would expect to split her work bonus with me if she got one, and she said that was different because she makes less money than I do overall. She said that my bonus represented a bigger financial opportunity for both of us to improve our situation together. The conversation got more heated when Chloe said that successful relationships require both people to think about the team rather than just themselves. She said that my unwillingness to share the bonus money proved that I wasn't as committed to our future together as she thought I was. I told Chloe that I was committed to our relationship, but that didn't mean every dollar I earned belonged to both of us. I explained that I had my own financial goals and debts that I wanted to address, and that using my bonus for those purposes wasn't selfish. Chloe said that prioritizing my student loans over our shared dreams was a choice that showed what really mattered to me. She said that couples who are serious about building a life together make financial decisions as a team, not as individuals who happen to be dating. I pointed out that we'd never discussed combining finances or making major financial decisions together before, so I was surprised that she expected me to automatically share my bonus. I said that if she wanted to talk about how we handle money as a couple going forward, that was a conversation we could have, but that this bonus felt like my money to allocate. Chloe said that I was being naive if I thought serious relationships could work with completely separate finances. She said that my bonus was an opportunity to show that I was ready to start thinking like a team, and that my refusal was a red flag about my readiness for a committed partnership. Since then, Chloe has been cold and distant toward me. She makes comments about how some people care more about money than relationships, and she stopped being enthusiastic about making future plans together. She says that my attitude about the bonus has made her question whether we want the same things from our relationship. Some of our mutual friends have weighed in on the situation with mixed opinions. A couple of people have said that Chloe is right, and that couples should share financial windfalls, especially when they're talking about building a future together. They think that keeping the bonus entirely to myself sends the wrong message about my commitment level. Other friends have said that expecting to automatically share a work bonus after dating for a year is presumptuous, and that Chloe is being unreasonable. They think that financial decisions should be made individually until couples are married, or at least living together and sharing expenses more formally. Am I the bad person for not wanting to split my work bonus with my girlfriend when she says it should go toward our shared future. That story ends there, and Chloe is basically claiming ownership of money you earned through your own extra work without any discussion beforehand. The fact that she immediately started planning how to spend our money shows she's already decided your finances should be merged without actually having that conversation with you. A work bonus isn't a lottery ticket you both won together, it's compensation for your individual effort and time. Moving on to our next story about workplace drama. Am I the bad person for not helping my co-worker finish their project? My co-worker James and I work in the same department at a marketing company, and we usually handle our own projects independently, unless we're specifically assigned to work together as a team. Last week, James came to me in a panic, asking if I could help him finish a presentation that was due the next morning. And when I said no, it created a lot of workplace tension. James explained that he'd had all week to work on this presentation for an important client meeting, but he'd been putting it off and now realised he couldn't finish it by himself in time. He said he needed someone to help him create slides, research data, and put together graphics that would make the presentation look professional. When I asked James what he'd been doing all week instead of working on the presentation, he got defensive and said he'd been busy with other things and hadn't realised how much work this project would require. He said that sometimes projects take longer than expected and that he needed a colleague to help him out in a pinch. I told James that I had my own deadlines to meet and couldn't stay late to help him with work he'd had all week to complete. I explained that I had plans that evening and that dropping everything to fix his time management issues wasn't something I was comfortable with. James got frustrated and said that co-workers are supposed to help each other when someone is in trouble. He pointed out that we work for the same company and that his presentation failing would reflect badly on our entire department, so helping him was actually helping all of us. I explained that while I understood the department connection, I wasn't responsible for James's inability to manage his time effectively. I said that consistently bailing him out when he procrastinated would just enable him to continue poor planning in the future. James said I was being selfish and that refusing to help a colleague in need wasn't how successful teams operate. He said that he'd remember my unwillingness to collaborate when I needed help with something in the future, which felt like a threat. I told James that collaboration was different from emergency assistance with projects someone had neglected for an entire week. I said that I was happy to collaborate on appropriate team projects, but that covering for someone's procrastination wasn't my responsibility. The situation got worse when James went to our supervisor and explained that he needed help finishing his presentation, but that I'd refused to assist him. He framed it as me being unwilling to support team goals rather than him failing to manage his time properly. Our supervisor called me into her office and asked why I wasn't willing to help James with his project. When I explained that James had had all week to work on it and that I had my own deadlines, she said that sometimes team members need to step up to support each other during busy periods. I felt frustrated because James had misrepresented the situation to our supervisor, making it sound like I was refusing reasonable collaboration rather than declining to fix his procrastination. I tried to explain the timeline, but our supervisor seemed more concerned about getting the presentation finished than addressing James's time management issues. James ended up staying late by himself and finishing a version of the presentation that apparently wasn't great, but was good enough for the client meeting. The client wasn't impressed, and James has been telling people that the presentation would have been much better if he'd gotten the help he needed from his colleagues. Since then, James has been cold toward me and makes passive-aggressive comments about people who aren't team players. He's also started excluding me from casual conversations and group activities, which has made the work environment uncomfortable. Some of my other co-workers have heard about the situation and have mixed opinions. A few people think I should have helped James since we're all on the same team and his failure could have affected everyone. Others think that constantly rescuing people from their own poor planning just enables bad behaviour. One co-worker mentioned that she's helped James with last-minute projects before and that it seems to be a pattern with him. She said that maybe refusing to help was the right choice if it forces him to manage his time better in the future. Am I the bad person for not staying late to help my co-worker finish a project he procrastinated on all week? That story ends there, and James learned the hard way that poor planning doesn't constitute an emergency for everyone else. The fact that he went to your supervisor and twisted the story shows he's more interested in shifting blame than taking responsibility for his own time management. You're not his personal assistant, and constantly bailing out people who can't handle their workload just teaches them that procrastination has no real consequences. Our next story deals with holiday workplace dynamics. Am I the bad person for refusing to cover my co-worker's shift on Christmas? I work at a retail store that stays open on holidays, and we usually have to sign up for shifts well in advance so everyone knows the schedule. This year, I volunteered to work on Christmas Eve, but specifically requested Christmas Day off because my family always does a big dinner, and it's important to me to be there. My co-worker, Ben, was scheduled to work on Christmas Day, but last week he asked if I would switch shifts with him so he could go to a party that night. He said it was a special event that only happened once a year and that he really didn't want to miss it for work. I told Ben that I couldn't switch because I had family plans that I'd made specifically because I knew I had Christmas off. I explained that my extended family only gets together a few times a year and that missing Christmas dinner would be really disappointing for everyone. Ben said that his party was also a once-a-year event and that family dinners happen regularly, so mine wasn't necessarily more important than his plans. He said that since we're both young and don't have kids, we should be flexible about holiday scheduling. I tried to explain that the reason I'd volunteered for Christmas Eve was specifically so I could have Christmas Day with my family, and that switching would defeat the purpose of the original scheduling. I said that Ben had known about his work schedule for weeks and should have planned around it. Ben got frustrated and said that I was being inflexible and that co-workers should help each other out when special occasions come up. He said that refusing to switch shifts showed that I wasn't willing to be a team player when someone needed a favour. I told Ben that I understood his disappointment about missing the party, but that I wasn't comfortable giving up my Christmas plans to cover for him. I suggested that he could ask other co-workers or see if a manager could help find someone else to switch with. Ben said that he'd already asked everyone else and that I was his last option. He made it sound like I was the only person who could solve his problem and that my refusal was ruining his holiday plans entirely. The conversation got more intense when Ben said that family dinners were obligations while his party was actually fun, and that I should prioritize helping him do something enjoyable rather than forcing him to work while I got to relax with relatives. I pointed out that Ben's party might be fun for him, but my family time was important to me, and that neither of our plans was more valid than the other. I said that the difference was that I'd planned my schedule around having Christmas off, while he'd apparently made party plans after already being scheduled to work. Ben said that I was being selfish and that good co-workers make sacrifices to help each other out during the holidays. He said that if the situation were reversed, he would definitely switch shifts to help me attend a family event. I told Ben that was easy to say when he wasn't the one being asked to give up his holiday plans, and that I didn't believe he'd actually switch if he had important commitments of his own. I said that I'd made my Christmas plans based on my scheduled day off and wasn't willing to change them. Ben started getting more desperate and offered to pay me extra money to take his shift. When I still said no, he got angry and accused me of caring more about family dinner than helping a friend who really needed support. The situation escalated when Ben went to our manager and asked if there was any way to force me to switch shifts with him. Our manager explained that shift swaps had to be voluntary and that she couldn't make me work on a day I'd specifically requested off. Ben came back to me after talking to the manager and said that I was officially his only hope for getting Christmas night off. He said that if I didn't help him, he'd miss one of the most important social events of his year, and it would be my fault. I felt bad seeing how upset Ben was, but I also felt manipulated by his constant pressure and guilt trips. I told him one final time that I couldn't switch shifts because I had family commitments that were important to me. Ben ended up working on Christmas Day and missing his party. He's been cold toward me ever since, making comments about how some people only care about themselves and don't understand what it means to help friends in need. Some of my other co-workers have heard about the situation and think I should have helped Ben out, since holiday parties only happen once a year. They say that family dinners are more flexible and that I could have had Christmas dinner on a different day. Other co-workers have said that Ben should have planned better and that I had every right to keep my scheduled day off for my own plans. They think that trying to guilt me into changing my schedule was unfair and manipulative. My manager hasn't said anything official about the situation, but I get the sense that she thinks workplace drama over shift swaps is silly and that both Ben and I should have handled it more professionally. Am I the bad person for refusing to cover my co-worker's Christmas shift so he could go to a party? That story comes to an end, and Ben's party plans don't automatically trump your family plans just because he decided at the last minute that work was inconvenient. The fact that he tried to get management to force you into switching shows he never respected that you had the right to say no in the first place. You scheduled your holidays intentionally, and changing your family plans so someone else can party isn't a reasonable request. Time for our next story about transportation expectations. Am I the bad person for not driving my co-worker home every night? My co-worker Megan and I work at the same office and happen to live in the same general direction, though she lives about 30 minutes further out than I do. For the past few months, I've occasionally given her rides home when the weather was bad or when her usual transportation fell through, but now she's started expecting me to drive her home every single day. The situation started when Megan's car broke down about 3 months ago, and she needed temporary help getting to and from work while she figured out repairs. I offered to give her rides for a few days, thinking it would be a short-term arrangement until she got her transportation sorted out. But instead of getting her car fixed quickly, Megan seemed to get comfortable with the ride situation and stopped treating it as urgent. She'd mentioned that she was still looking into repair options or thinking about buying a different car, but weeks went by without any progress on actually solving her transportation problem. What made it more complicated was that Megan doesn't live directly on my route home. To drop her off, I have to drive about 30 minutes out of my way and then 30 minutes back, which adds an hour to my commute every day. What used to be a 20-minute drive home has turned into an hour and 20-minute ordeal. I initially didn't mind helping out occasionally, but doing it every single day has become exhausting and expensive. The extra gas money adds up, and getting home an hour later every night means I have less time for cooking, exercise, errands, and relaxing after work. When I mentioned to Megan that the daily rides were becoming difficult for me, she seemed surprised and a little offended. She said that we were already driving in the same direction anyway, so dropping her off wasn't really that much extra trouble for me. I tried to explain that 30 minutes each way was actually a significant detour that was costing me time and money every day. I said that I was happy to help occasionally, but that driving her home every single day indefinitely wasn't something I could continue doing. Megan said that she was working on getting her own transportation, but that these things take time, and that she really appreciated my help during this difficult period. She made it sound like I'd be abandoning her if I stopped providing daily rides. The conversation got awkward when Megan said that she'd been telling her family and friends how grateful she was to have such a helpful co-worker, and that she didn't know what she'd do without my support. She made me feel guilty for even bringing up the inconvenience. I suggested that Megan could look into public transportation options, rideshare services, or maybe arrange rides with other co-workers who lived closer to her. She said that all of those alternatives would be expensive or unreliable, and that my rides were the best solution for everyone. Megan also pointed out that we work at the same place and leave at the same time every day, so giving her rides was just a matter of making one extra stop on my way home. She didn't seem to understand that 30 minutes each way was actually a significant addition to my daily routine. When I continued to express concern about the arrangement, Megan said that she'd thought we were becoming good friends and that friends help each other through difficult times. She said that my reluctance to continue helping made her feel like our workplace relationship was more superficial than she'd believed. The situation came to a head last week when I told Megan that I could only give her rides home twice a week instead of every day, and that she'd need to find alternative transportation for the other 3 days. She was clearly upset and said that inconsistent rides would actually be harder to manage than no rides at all. Megan accused me of being selfish and said that I was making her transportation crisis more difficult by withdrawing my support without warning. She said that she'd been depending on my help and that changing the arrangement suddenly was unfair to her planning. I tried to explain that 2 hours of extra driving time per week was still more help than most co-workers would provide. But Megan said that partial help wasn't really helpful if it meant she still had to solve the problem on the days I wasn't available. Since then, Megan has been cold toward me at work and makes comments about people who can't be counted on when others need them. She's told other co-workers that I used to give her rides but stopped because I didn't want to be inconvenienced, which makes me sound unreasonable. Some people at work think I should continue helping Megan since she's still working on getting her car situation resolved. Others think that 3 months of daily rides was already generous and that Megan should have solved her transportation problem by now instead of relying on my help indefinitely. Am I the bad person for not wanting to drive my co-worker home every night when it adds an hour to my commute? That story ends there, and Megan has somehow convinced herself that an hour of your time every single day is no big deal because you're already driving in that direction. 3 months of free taxi service should have been plenty of time for her to figure out permanent transportation, but instead, she got comfortable treating you like her personal chauffeur. The fact that she's playing victim to other co-workers instead of acknowledging your generosity shows she never really appreciated the favour in the first place. Our next story takes us into the world of modern tipping culture. Am I the bad person for not tipping at a self-serve cafe? I stopped by a local cafe yesterday morning to grab a quick coffee before work, and when I got to the counter to pay, I encountered one of those awkward tipping situations that seem to be everywhere these days. The cafe operates on a self-serve model where you pour your own coffee, add your own cream and sugar, and basically handle everything yourself, but they still had a tip screen at checkout. I walked in, grabbed a cup, filled it with coffee from the dispenser, added some cream, and headed to the register to pay. The barista scanned my cup and the payment screen popped up with tip options of 15, 20, or 25%, plus a custom amount option and a no tip button. I hesitated because I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be tipping for in this situation. The employee behind the counter had literally done nothing except scan my cup and process my payment. I had poured my own coffee, prepared it the way I liked it, and would be cleaning up after myself when I left. The barista was standing right there, watching me navigate the payment screen, which made the whole situation feel awkward and pressuring. I could see her looking at me expectantly while I decided what to do about the tip prompt. I ended up hitting the no tip button because I genuinely didn't understand what service I would be paying extra for. I paid for my coffee and left, but the barista's expression made it clear that she was not happy with my decision not to tip. Later that day, I mentioned the situation to my friend Sarah, who said that I should have tipped anyway, because service workers depend on tips to make a living wage. She said that even if the service was minimal, the principle of supporting workers was more important than whether I felt like I'd received traditional table service. I tried to explain that I wasn't opposed to tipping in general, but that I didn't understand the expectation to tip for self-service. I said that if I'm doing all the work myself, it felt like the business was just asking for extra money without providing additional value. Sarah said that I was being cheap and that tipping culture had evolved to include more types of service interactions. She said that refusing to tip at any food service establishment was selfish, especially when the amounts were small and the workers clearly needed the money. I pointed out that if every business started expecting tips for minimal service, costs would keep going up without any improvement in the customer experience. I said that I'd rather pay higher menu prices and know that workers were being paid fairly than have to guess at appropriate tip amounts for every transaction. Sarah said that wasn't how the current system works, and that by not tipping, I was essentially punishing workers for their employers' wage policies. She said that individual customers don't get to opt out of tipping culture just because they disagree with it philosophically. The conversation got more heated when Sarah said that people who don't tip are usually just looking for excuses to be selfish with their money. She said that a couple dollars wouldn't hurt my budget, but could make a real difference for someone working in food service. I told Sarah that I tip generously when I receive actual service, like at restaurants where servers take orders and bring food to my table. I said that I just didn't understand why self-service situations now included the same tipping expectations as full-service establishments. Sarah said that I was splitting hairs and that the principle of supporting service workers should apply regardless of the specific tasks they performed. She said that my attitude was contributing to a culture where workers in the service industry struggle to make ends meet. Since then, I've been second-guessing my decision not to tip at the cafe. Part of me wonders if I should have just paid the extra few dollars to avoid any awkwardness or potential judgment from the employee. But another part of me feels like automatically tipping for self-service sets a precedent where businesses can ask for extra money without providing additional value to customers. I worry that if everyone just goes along with expanded tipping expectations, it will become the norm everywhere. I've noticed that more and more businesses are adding tip screens to their payment systems, even in situations where customers are doing most of the work themselves. Coffee shops, ice cream counters, takeout restaurants, and even some retail stores now prompt customers to add tips during checkout. Am I the bad person for not tipping at a self-serve cafe where I poured my own coffee and handled everything myself? That story wraps up. And honestly, the tip screen at a self-service cafe is just guilt-tripping customers into subsidizing wages for work they didn't actually receive. Sarah's argument that you're punishing workers misses the point that businesses are the ones creating this awkward situation by asking for tips when no service was provided. If pouring your own coffee requires a tip, then pretty soon we'll be expected to tip at grocery stores for scanning our own items. Let's move into our next story about relationship privacy boundaries. Am I the bad person for not wanting my partner to share our fights with friends? My boyfriend Ryan has this habit of telling his entire friend group every detail about our relationship when we have arguments, and it's starting to make me really uncomfortable. Whenever we disagree about something, even minor issues, Ryan immediately texts his friends about it and asks for their opinions on who's right and who's wrong. Last month we had a disagreement about household chores and how to split them fairly. It wasn't a huge fight, just a normal relationship discussion about expectations and responsibilities. But the next day, I found out that Ryan had told his entire friend group about our conversation, including specific details about what I'd said and how I'd reacted. His friend Marcus mentioned it when I saw him at a party, making a joke about how I apparently don't like doing dishes. I was mortified because this was supposed to be a private conversation between Ryan and me, not entertainment for his social circle. When I asked Ryan why he felt the need to share our personal discussions with his friends, he said that he just needed to vent and get outside perspectives on our relationship issues. He said that talking to friends about relationship problems was completely normal and that I was being oversensitive about privacy. I tried to explain that there's a difference between occasionally asking for advice and broadcasting every detail of our arguments to multiple people. I said that some things should stay between us, especially when they involve personal feelings or private aspects of our relationship. Ryan said that his friends gave good advice and helped him understand my perspective better sometimes. He claimed that their input actually made him a better boyfriend because he could see situations from different angles. I pointed out that I never consented to having our relationship discussions become group conversations with people I barely know. I said that it felt like a violation of trust when he shared intimate details about our conflicts without asking me first. Ryan got defensive and said that everyone talks to their friends about relationship issues and that I was being unrealistic to expect complete privacy. He said that trying to control what he discussed with his friends was manipulative and controlling behavior. The situation got worse when I discovered that Ryan had created a group chat specifically for discussing our relationship problems. His friends would weigh in with opinions about whether I was being unreasonable or if Ryan was handling situations correctly. I felt like I was being judged by people who only heard one side of every story and didn't know the full context of our relationship dynamics. Ryan's friends were forming opinions about me based solely on his version of events during our worst moments. When I asked Ryan to stop sharing our private conversations with his friends, he said that would make him feel isolated and unable to process relationship stress. He said that his friends were his support system and that cutting off that communication would be unhealthy for him. I suggested that he could talk to a therapist or counselor instead of broadcasting our problems to his social circle. But Ryan said that was expensive and unnecessary when he had friends who cared about him. The final straw came when one of Ryan's friends approached me at a coffee shop and started giving me unsolicited advice about how to be a better girlfriend. This person felt comfortable lecturing me about my relationship based entirely on what Ryan had told him about our private discussions. I told Ryan that his friends giving me relationship advice based on his complaints about me was completely inappropriate and embarrassing. I said that I couldn't continue dating someone who treated our personal life like public entertainment for his social group. Ryan accused me of being paranoid and antisocial. He said that healthy people don't keep secrets from their friends, and that my desire for privacy was a red flag about my ability to maintain relationships. Am I the bad person for not wanting my partner to share our relationship conflicts with his entire friend group? That story ends there, and Ryan has basically turned your relationship into his personal reality show where his friends get to vote on every episode. Having his buddy lecture you about being a better girlfriend based on his one-sided stories is beyond inappropriate. There's a huge difference between occasionally seeking advice and creating a whole group chat dedicated to dissecting your private moments. You're not asking for secrecy, you're asking for basic respect and boundaries that most healthy relationships require. Moving along to our next story about workplace financial pressure. Am I the bad person for refusing to lend my co-worker money? My co-worker Olivia and I work in the same department, and last week she asked if she could borrow $100 until her next paycheck. She said she was short on rent money and that she'd pay me back as soon as she got paid on Friday. When I told her I couldn't lend her the money, it created an awkward situation at work. Olivia explained that she'd had some unexpected expenses this month and was coming up short on her rent payment. She said that her landlord was strict about late fees and that she really needed help to avoid extra charges. She made it sound like a temporary emergency that would be resolved quickly. The problem is that Olivia has a reputation around the office for asking people for money and not paying it back promptly. I've heard from other co-workers that she's borrowed money from them in the past and then made excuses about repayment for weeks or months. My friend Jake told me that he lent Olivia $50 6 months ago and still hasn't gotten it back. Every time he brings it up, she says she'll pay him next week, but it never happens. He eventually gave up asking because it was making their work relationship too uncomfortable. Another co-worker mentioned that Olivia had asked her for money multiple times, always with urgent explanations about unexpected bills or emergencies. She said that Olivia seemed to have financial crises more frequently than most people, which made her wonder about her money management skills. When I told Olivia that I couldn't lend her the money, she seemed surprised and hurt. She said that she thought we had a good working relationship and that she'd always been friendly and helpful to me. She made it sound like refusing to lend money was somehow unfriendly or unsupportive. I tried to explain that it wasn't about our working relationship, but about my personal policy of not lending money to co-workers. I said that mixing money and work relationships could create complications that I preferred to avoid. Olivia said that $100 wasn't that much money and that she really would pay me back on Friday when she got her paycheck. She showed me her direct deposit notification from previous weeks to prove that she had regular income coming in. I told Olivia that I understood she was in a difficult situation, but that I wasn't comfortable lending money regardless of the amount or repayment timeline. I suggested that she might want to talk to her bank about a short-term loan or see if she could work out a payment arrangement with her landlord. Olivia got frustrated and said that banks don't give loans for small amounts like that, and that her landlord wasn't flexible about payment schedules. She said that borrowing from a co-worker was her only option to avoid late fees and potential eviction threats. The conversation got more uncomfortable when Olivia pointed out that I'd recently bought lunch out several times and had mentioned getting new clothes, so clearly I had some discretionary spending money. She said that if I could afford those things, I could afford to help a co-worker in need. I felt defensive because Olivia was essentially monitoring my spending and using it to justify why I should lend her money. I tried to explain that having money for occasional purchases didn't mean I was obligated to lend it to other people. Olivia said that she'd always thought I was a generous and caring person, and that my refusal to help was making her reconsider what kind of colleague I really was. She made it sound like my character was being judged based on my willingness to provide financial assistance. Since then, things have been awkward between us at work. Olivia is polite but distant, and she makes occasional comments about how some people only care about themselves. She's also started eating lunch alone instead of joining our usual group. I've heard through other co-workers that Olivia has been telling people about my refusal to lend her money, framing it as me being selfish when she was facing a housing crisis. Some people seem sympathetic to her situation, while others understand why I wouldn't want to lend money to a co-worker. Am I the bad person for refusing to lend my co-worker money when she said she was facing eviction? That story wraps up there, and Olivia is running a guilt trip operation that's apparently worked on multiple co-workers already. The fact that Jake still hasn't gotten his $50 back after 6 months tells you everything you need to know about her repayment reliability. You're not a bank, and monitoring your lunch purchases to justify why you should fund her rent is completely out of line. Work relationships and money don't mix well, especially when someone has a track record of treating loans like gifts. Let's move to our next story about social obligations and dating. Am I the bad person for not attending my girlfriend's friend's wedding? My girlfriend Mia was invited to her friend Sophia's wedding last weekend, and she automatically assumed I'd be going with her as her +1. When I told her I didn't really want to attend, it created a huge argument between us that's still ongoing. Mia and Sophia have been friends since college, but I've only met Sophia maybe 3 or 4 times at group gatherings. We don't have any kind of personal relationship, and our interactions have always been polite but surface level. I know basically nothing about her or her fiancé beyond their names. The wedding was on a Saturday, which is usually when I handle errands, catch up on household tasks, and just decompress from the work week. I was looking forward to having a relaxing day at home, rather than spending hours at a social event with people I barely know. When I explained this to Mia, she said that attending the wedding wasn't really about me knowing Sophia personally. She said it was about supporting her by being her date and helping her celebrate her friend's important milestone. I told Mia that I understood she wanted me there for support, but that spending an entire day at a wedding for someone I barely knew felt like a lot to ask. I said that I'd be happy to drop her off and pick her up or help her get ready, but that actually attending the ceremony and reception wasn't something I was enthusiastic about. Mia got upset and said that couples typically attend weddings together, and that my refusal made it look like I wasn't committed to our relationship. She said that other people would notice I wasn't there and might think we were having problems. I tried to explain that my absence didn't reflect anything negative about our relationship, just that I didn't feel comfortable spending a whole day at an event where I'd know virtually no one except her. I said that I'd be perfectly fine with her attending solo and having a great time with her friends. Mia said that going to weddings alone was awkward and that she'd been looking forward to having me there to dance with and talk to during the quieter moments. She said that weddings were more when you fund your partner there to share the experience. The conversation escalated when Mia accused me of being antisocial and unwilling to participate in normal couple activities. She said that attending social events together was part of being in a relationship, and that my refusal showed I didn't want to integrate into her social circle. I pointed out that I do attend events with Mia regularly, including parties and gatherings where I know more people. I said that this particular wedding felt different because I would have absolutely no connection to anyone there except her. Mia said that was exactly why she needed me there, because being surrounded by couples while attending solo would make her feel left out and awkward. She said that I was prioritizing my own comfort over her needs and feelings. That story ends there, and Mia is treating wedding attendance like a relationship loyalty test. You barely knowing the bride doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your entire weekend to sit through someone else's ceremony. The fact that she's more worried about what other people will think than respecting your comfort level shows she cares more about appearances than your feelings. Sometimes being supportive means understanding when your partner needs space, not dragging them to every social obligation. Hopefully this helped you with whatever, if that be falling asleep, getting back to sleep, or just to have as background noise for you to work. If you want more stories like these every evening, consider hitting the subscribe button. Other than that, thank you for tuning in tonight, and I look forward to seeing you back again tomorrow. Take care.